explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, my lord?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. State to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail.
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all.
You fought bravely. John, I do not know what strength is like.
Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
Okay, welcome to The Narrative, episode 60, The War That Wasn't. Which is a bold title to pick, and one that I'm certainly not making any argument in favor of. But I just figured I'd rustle some jimmies all over the world with that one, and I hope your jimmies are sufficiently rustled before we get started. Speaking of rustled jimmies, as many of you know in the chat, the Bright family's jimmies were rustled severely last week. 81 hours without power. I think the coldest it got overnight was 13 degrees, and me and my fuzzy boys slept by the fire in the house. I was trying to make sure the pipes didn't freeze, while Mrs. Bright and Baby Bright were literally at a Wampanoag shelter. And over time, it seemed that by day 2 or 3, Baby Bright basically was a member of the security team. He wanted nothing to do with the rest of what was going on there and just kept going to the security team and hanging out with these huge Wampanoag dudes. So, you know, he had a great week. Mama Bright and me had a bit of a stressful week, but everything's good. Thank God our house somehow avoided damage. And yeah, none of us got hurt besides my back from shoveling. And not everybody was as lucky. So that shit was crazy though. I'm one of those don't worry about it, stop looking at the weather kind of guys when Mrs. Bright was like bugging me like it's going to be a really bad storm. And I was like, I've heard that. I've heard those comms for years. I'm not afraid of no storm. And when I was out there shoveling in 80-mile-per-hour gusts at 4 to 5 inches of driving salt ocean snow per hour, I was looking up at the trees going, this is how it happens. And yeah, it didn't though. I'm back. They couldn't stop us. So happy to be back. Happy to see you guys. Thank you for all the well wishes. And, came back and thought I'd ease back into the info war. And then Donnie just throws a new discombobulator out into the Matrix. And this is a big one. This makes Operation Absolute Resolve look like a combobulator by comparison. So tonight I'm going to have the ghost of Base Patrick Henry on. The funny thing about this is I already was going to have Ghost on before this deployment dropped. So, I would say it kind of derailed what I originally was going to talk about, but maybe it railed it. It railed it in the best way possible, which is a very strange thing to say. Tom Terrific out the gate, $25 for the cause. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I found out the last few days that the intro to this show with its awesome music apparently screws this show on YouTube in some way, but I don't want to change it. So, if you guys want to help monetize the show, besides the sponsors who help monetize the show, you can do that. And you can send a rant over for the effort. And we will get to those a little bit later on. Otherwise, we are going to hit a couple of our sponsors to start the show, starting with our own All Good. Make self-care great again with All Good by Jessica Storm, who I see in the chat there. She's kind of my co-pilot. By co-pilot, I mean she's the pilot. She basically flies the entire ship, and it somehow just makes it where it's supposed to go. Made in small batches by Jessica in Florida, with only clean ingredients, with purpose, zero junk, packaged in amber glass jars, so it's all good inside and out. And we do have many of those amber glass jars dotted around our house. Start with the lightweight pure whip tallow for all over hydration. Tighten up with no tox smoothing serum. Nourish your hair with the game-changing tallow hair mask, and finish with tamed hair serum or tallow beard balm for control and style. I have used the beard balm. I like that. And Mrs. Bright has sent me her own testimonial about the tallow hair mask. And as I have said before, with her rich red hair, she is very persnickety about what she puts in there. And Jessica's product makes the cut. So grab a bundle of all your favorites, badlandsmedia.tv/allgood. Use the promo code Badlands to discount your entire purchase and to support the creators of Badlands Media. See what the buzz is about at badlandsmedia.tv/allgood. Promo code Badlands. Thank you guys for supporting Jessica, and thank you to Jessica for supporting us, as well as essentially running this whole thing. We are also brought to you by our new-ish friends and now proud supporters of The Narrative. Happy to have them. You guys have seen them on the Power Hour. They've been a great sponsor of ours lately. So please check out our friends at Patriot Protect. Today it's scarily easy for criminals, scammers, or anyone with bad intentions to find your personal info online. Your home address, phone number, workplace, even your family members' names are exposed with just a few clicks. With this much info in public, scams aren't random. Hundreds of people search sites, and data brokers compile profiles linking your name, address, phone number, relatives, and online behavior. Scammers use these profiles to decide who to target and how to approach them. That's how identity fraud starts, long before the damage shows up. Patriot Protect removes your personal data from the internet, wiping it from Google and every major website where bad actors search for targets. Patriot Protect finds and deletes your personal info from 240 people's search engines and data brokers. Once your profiles are eliminated, the search and destroy protocol runs continuous monitoring, so every new exposure is detected and wiped immediately. It's the peace of mind of having your own security team, all for about the cost of keeping your porch lights on. That's too soon. If you want to take control of your personal info and reduce your exposure, go to patriot-protect.com/narrative. Use the code Badlands for 15% off all Patriot Protect plans. That's patriot-protect.com/narrative. Use the promo code Badlands. We are getting good feedback from this. And you guys know how it is. Sometimes you get no spam calls for like a month, and then sometimes you get 3 in a day, which means that your shit just wound up on one of those sites. And I believe we also have one more to start the show from our friends, if I can click the right thing here, at Rumble themselves. And that is the Rumble wallet. They freeze your accounts, they shut off your cards, they lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you, they control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can own Tether Gold, real gold on the blockchain. Through Tether Gold, you get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold, it's not an IOU, it's real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them directly using Rumble Wallet, peer-to-peer, and outside the banking system. No permission, no middleman, no cancel button. This wallet is yours forever. Thank you very much to Rumble Wallet. And thank you to everybody who has actually used that. There are some supporters of the show who have sent over sats through the Rumble Wallet. And it is kind of surreal. Some of the things we talked about several years ago, like gold on the blockchain, is now an actual thing that's going on. Okay, without further ado, we have the guy who is going to tell us what's actually going on, which we will then entirely dismiss. But before we entirely dismiss that, it will be interesting to hear what we are told is actually going on. How's it going, Ghost?
What's up? Just to be clear, I have no idea what the fuck's going on. So.
Oh, great. What the hell, man? It's like you have one job. No, I would say Ghost and I were talking a little bit backstage, and the curse of the reputation we've started to cultivate, for better or worse, at We Who Remain at Badlands, is that we can change our opinions about what's actually going on and do that all the time, but we tend to maintain consistent principles and ciphers through which we view things. And at times when everybody else in the quote-unquote info war or truth community is inverting their previously held positions on a dime, it puts us in a weird position sometimes. But I'm actually looking forward to it. I think these kinds of narratives and actuals are good challenges. But how did it all hit you on Saturday when you were trying to recover from the man flu?
Yeah, I did have the man flu. As I was telling Alpha that earlier when I was doing his show. So I didn't log into social media until quite some time on Saturday. And by that time, all hell was breaking loose, I guess. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, well, that's disappointing. Very disappointing, actually. And I still feel that way. I still feel like I'm pretty disappointed that the Bush administration and the Netanyahu administration got their way. Because if you're familiar with what the Bush administration, the clean break doctrine, all of that, they had 7 countries lined up that they were going to knock down. I actually have the clip. Let's play the clip of Clark, of Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, explaining this. Here's how we're going to go about destroying the Middle East, and it's pretty spot on to how this is from the year 2000, I think, or 2001.
Brings me back.
Yeah. So here's what he said.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Yeah, and they're all sitting there laughing.
The truth is about the Middle East is, had there been no oil there, it would be like Africa. Nobody is threatening to intervene in Africa. The problem is the opposite. We keep asking for people to intervene and stop it. And there's no question that the presence of petroleum throughout the region has sparked great power involvement. Whether that was the specific motivation for the coup or not, I can't tell you, but there's always been this attitude that somehow we could intervene and use force in the region.
Well, yeah, there's a few things there. It's not just about the oil; it's about the pipelines connecting Europe with Asia. That's a major part of the conflicts in the Middle East over the past 20 years. He says that, they're laughing like, well, why are we going into war in Iraq? I can tell you exactly why the fuck we went into war in Iraq, and it has everything to do with what was called the Iraq Liberation Act of 1998. Let me show you what that was. It was 32 CFR 273, I think is whatever. I have a PDF here. I was trying to find the actual from the congressional site, but I have like the raw PDF here. But it was signed into law on October 31st, 1998 by Bill Clinton. There's even like a clip of him talking about it as he signs it in. And it says, to establish a program to support a transition to democracy in Iraq being enacted, it is now the official position of the U.S. government that the Saddam Hussein government will be overthrown. And that was in 1998.
Yeah.
Okay, so like they planned, and that had to, and again, that was proposed by a Republican congressman from New York. Okay, and it was part of something called the Clean Break Doctrine, which was a white paper that was spun up out of one of these think tanks that was funded by Israeli donors, Jewish donors, all of them connected to Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu, who at the time was the prime minister in Israel, got this like in front of all these Republican congressmen and said, we got to destroy Iraq. That's the plan. And so then when they did 9/11, when Israel did 9/11 a few years later, it was like Iraq, like that's where we're going. We're going to Iraq. Right. Like, don't get.
Yeah, they knew right away.
Yeah, they knew right away. We're going to Iraq. So it's like, and remember in September 11th, 2002, when Netanyahu testified in front of the Senate on television, he said this was before we went into Iraq, because at that point we were only in Afghanistan. He said, I guarantee if you murder Saddam Hussein, you will bring peace to the Middle East, but you also need to go ahead and destroy Iran as well. And he said, I suggest what we should do is we should blast Melrose Place, episodes of Melrose Place, into every television in Iran as part of a psychological warfare operation, because it will turn all their teenagers into degenerates, sex-crazed degenerates. That's what he said. Melrose Place. Now think about what they were doing to our teenagers in America with that shit. So, it's also tiresome. That's kind of like the point here. It's like, it's also tiresome.
It's a rerun from quite a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a rerun from quite a long time ago. And people who want to spin it up into something else. Look, maybe Trump will come out and give us some new information that's like, oh, like all of the people who stole all of our elections and created all of our central banks and did everything that was ever terrible over the past century, they were all in Tehran this whole time. Okay. But that's not very likely to happen. And yeah, like the question is like to what end? I guess we'll find out. But it's disappointing to see like Lindsey Graham and Mark Levin and Laura Loomer
having the time of their lives,
like win the day. Yeah, that is disappointing.
Yeah, there's a lot to get into here. and I'll try to keep it on some semblance of a track because I have I guess I shouldn't say a positive read of this, but I have a read that's consistent with how I tend to read these things, which doesn't mean I'm right about how I read these things. But I guess that's more on the narrative front, and obviously that's the name of this show, and I do want to talk about the narrative quite a bit, good and bad. But, we can talk more about the actual, but I think to start with there, when you're talking about, we talk about cognitive ciphers a lot and sort of these modes of thinking in these strategies that we try to come up with to apply to new situations in the info war. And by definition, even if you're dealing with, I know this is old hat to this audience, but these are the times when it's important to remember these kind of lessons. By definition, no matter what is or is not happening in the world, it's not trying to be cute to say that we don't know. It's just the reality. You could believe that everything you're being told is happening as you're being told it. But the bottom line is we don't know. So the reason that we try to create these sort of cognitive ciphers and these pattern recognition sort of things, these rules of engagement in the info war, is because on some level, all of us understand that we need them in order to apply to situations like this. How many times have you and I and several of us at Badlands been on the air in recent months sort of talking about how almost easy the news cycle is, like how predictable, I guess, in other words. And I think a lot of the reason we think it's so predictable, and a lot of our audience has felt the same way, is like, oh, well, we saw this coming, this was signaled, that was signaled, whether you're a Q person, whether you're a Devo person, whether you've just, you've got your own cognitive ciphers you apply. Nothing's really been shocking a lot of the Badlands for a while based on what's going on. This one definitely took some of us by surprise, took a lot of the MAGA base by surprise. It took a lot of the audience by surprise, took a lot of us by surprise, just how escalatory, what's it called? Operation Epic Fury. That's the current narrative deployment. I mean, the fact that they even name these things in such bombastic, ridiculous manners to me is so narrative coded. And that's nothing new. To your point about the wars in the Middle East going back 20 years, etc., I mean, they've always been naming these things, these epic sort of military names that you could put on the shelf there, like Return of the King, and then it's Operation Epic Fury comes right after it, right? So that's nothing new. But the reason I bring up the naming of the op is not to say that the op is fake. It's to say that whatever the actual is, and there are actuals, the people deploying the military operation understand inherently that what is being deployed to the world is, for all intents and purposes, a narrative, right? If everything that we're being told is happening in Operation Epic Fury is happening, the truth is the actual effects of it, the actuals of Epic Fury, are contained to this specific region where, as it relates to Americans. That doesn't mean it's good, but what I mean is the narrative, the way these things hit a lot of people on an emotional level is like, oh my God, we are at war. Oh my God, this is happening to us, or we are doing this or something. And I think sometimes it's good to just get some immediate distance from it and say, what's happening is the United States military is engaged in an operation that they are telling us about that we can't really confirm or deny. And to your point, it's making some of the people we hate the most really happy. And I guess that's where I would start with and hand it back to you is the reason I said at the start of the show, we try to be consistent with how we approach these things. It's not to say that we're going to know what's going on, even though I'm sure a lot of the people out there in the info war are telling you with confidence that they know exactly what's going on. I joked with Ghost before the show. How many of you have seen an immediate, not just a pivot, a 180 in the last 24 hours of all of your favorite follows who kept saying Israel for last since 2017, and you know how they meant that when they've been saying it for the last 9 years, but in the last 24 hours, somehow they meant the opposite the whole time, right? What they meant was Donald Trump and Israel are going to purge the Middle East of infidels and spread freedom through fire across the globe, right? That's what the drops were signaling. That's not what I think they were signaling, and I do think they were signaling something. And that's my early bit of hopium from our perspective to inject into this conversation, is to say, my consistent way I approach these things is to look at what is the effect of the narrative on the battle space. And you mentioned that before we went live. And ironically, when I see the worst people in the world celebrating things, that doesn't mean everybody who's celebrating this is celebrating it for the same reasons, but the Lindsey Grahams of the world and the neocons of the world, the reason they're celebrating these things is because they believe they've got what they've wanted, to your point. They believe they are going to get what they wanted. And we can talk about whether or not they are, but that's a good place to start. And the reason I weirdly say that I'm injecting a white pill early here is I've studied Donald Trump's narrative deployments for a decade. A lot of us have. And I don't believe that we've misread him. And I don't believe that people like you have misread the people you've read on the battle space. So are those two things reconcilable? And I think they might be, but I think that's kind of the question. That's where my head goes. Is it possible to reconcile Donald Trump being who we think he is with some of the worst people in the world being who we think they are and seeming to like what he's doing right now?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Well, I mean, just to be clear, Israel for last, I still think that holds. I still think that if we don't confront that as a country, then we have lost. There's no other way to look at it. If we don't confront the thing that has infiltrated our government, taken it over, and clearly controls it, and that's the other thing. Like, the big takeaway from the past 36 hours, there are more people walking around today who are like, okay, Israel definitely controls our government. Yeah, than there ever have been. That has reached an apex,
and some love it. Some are really happy to have that confirmed.
Oh my gosh, yeah, there are people who are like, yeah, of course Israel controls our government, and that's a good thing. Like I've seen that. I've seen a little bit of that too, because they're the most moral army in the world, of course. Yeah, it's pretty sick. But you know, like there's that element, of the situation where there are. I mean, you talk about. I don't know if you call it red pilling or you call it black pilling, or I mean, your mileage may vary depending on who you're talking to. But I think that opinion is very widespread now. That even like people who are very casual observers of this stuff are of the opinion that I think Netanyahu probably is pulling some levers here and there.
Isn't that maybe another little white pill? Because I can speak from experience. I often drop these anecdotes of my other job. I am subjected to some of the most retarded people who believe that they are not retarded in the world. Journalists, sports journalists. Sports journalists are just like people who wanted to be activist journalists but ended up in sports. And to your point there about Israel, these people are all never Trumpers. And a lot of them are Jews. These media types that I am inundated with. Yep. And it's really funny recently because all of those people, these are the weird places I find white pills, Ghost. A lot of those people that I've been following for years and subjected to who hate Trump and really hate anti-Semitism are kind of on their feeds this weekend going, damn, Israel is running our government. And these would be the first kind of accounts that a couple of years ago would be like, we must stop the anti-Semitism running rampant throughout the country, right? And now a lot of these journalists are like, man, the Jews kind of have a lot to do with what our military seems to be doing. And since I'm a never Trumper, I'm supposed to condemn anything our military is doing. So the reason I say it's a white pill is because to me, those are usually early signs that somebody has fallen into something here, right? Like that it's not all what it looks like necessarily. Now, I'm really not trying to say it's hopium. I'm just saying many of the worst people in the world are against this, and that doesn't mean it's automatically good. But the reasons that they're against it, there might be some signal there that there is a lot of fog of war.
It could be a silver lining, that's for sure. And look, like, to be clear about some of these other developments that we've seen, I've always been very cautious not to get too emotional about this stuff, especially right out the gate. The Gaza Riviera thing, like I think I was live right after that happened, like in like an hour after it happened, maybe even been as it was happening. And I literally said, I was like, this is something where we should just pause and give it time, because I think when Trump says we're going to pull 2.5 million people out of Gaza and force them to leave and never allow them to come back, I think he's full of shit. I think he's intentionally saying that with Netanyahu sitting next to him to get Netanyahu's Jimmy's Russell, so Netanyahu and all of his buddies start saying that shit on their own, and they did. And then Trump walked it back and was like, I didn't actually really mean that. Maduro, I literally predicted on October 7th of my show that we were going to extract Maduro via arrest. We were going to go into Venezuela, arrest him, and pull him out. So I was the least surprised person on January 3rd when I woke up and saw that Maduro had been
and you were there pretty much.
Yeah. And I was in the Caribbean when that happened. I mean, so yeah, it's like I typically don't get caught off guard by like the stuff that Trump's doing entirely, and I will always kind of reserve emotion and opinion. Like I won't run to social media and just like get angry or upset or whatever. This is something though that I'm sitting here just looking at, and I'm just kind of like, man, this sucks, because not only was I wrong, like I was very certain we weren't going to have a war with Iran, but I guess we will. But because of the fallout, like the narrative fallout that we were talking about before the show, like people are going to blackpill from this. There's no like denying that. And anyone who wants to tell you that there's not going to be blackpilling from this is full of shit.
Yeah, it doesn't mean necessarily you guys watching the show, but goes you were saying before the show, like a lot of normies are definitely blackpilling over this. Like it's very because whatever we talk about tonight, and I do plan to make some arguments about what I think could actually be going on here. But whatever that is, whatever 5D chess we're gonna play tonight, and that might be going on with Trump and Iran and all this shit, it is true that, to your point, how this is being translated to Normieville is the surface level. Like it's we're going to war in the Middle East, and it is worth. It's not, people call us doomers, whatever. I'm not trying to doom out. In fact, I'm gonna hopium carpet bomb people tonight. To which I'm probably gonna be called. People are gonna take a week off of calling me a black pill, and they're gonna start calling me a hopium merchant. But it is notable whenever the liberals on your feed start side by siding videos of Trump talking about not getting involved in regime change and not getting involved in Middle East, juxtaposed with him holding 2 press conferences or 2 addresses in the last 24 hours talking about how, of course, we were always going to do this, and this is the righteous thing to do. So, like, whatever you guys think of it, and it's okay to think there's a bigger plan here. I do think there's a bigger plan here, but on the surface level, it is absolutely and inarguably a contradiction on the surface level based on how Donald Trump ran his campaign. Not just this campaign, but his first campaign. His entire campaign was about anti-interventionism and all that kind of stuff. So 24 hours in, this is obviously not that.
Yeah. And, we talked about before we went live, the people that I knew personally who, like the research team, I guess you'd call us that for lack of a better word. Back when everyone was doing the We the Media thing, which I didn't even know about, I missed that whole boat. I was off in a different corner of the internet, met people that were really interesting, really great researchers. And we would basically just like have these like hardcore cram sessions where we would just like come to the table. We would do like Zoom calls. We would share like everything that this was like early Biden administration. We would share like all the stuff we come up with. And it wasn't just like what was happening currently. It was like history. It was like the history of the CIA. I learned more about the CIA in those cram sessions than I have anywhere else. Like everything I know about the CIA, I learned in those cram sessions. So these were the best researchers I've ever met, bar none. And every single one of them, except for one, every single one of them black-pilled and ended up leaving the battle space completely during the Biden administration. And basically the reason they black-pilled is because it was over Israel. They were like, it's very clear that this Israel thing is not changing and that they're controlling the Biden administration. Trump seems to be beholden to them in some capacity. They were all like into queue, but they were like, you know, if this thing's going to work out, and it probably will, like, doesn't need me. Like, obviously, this whole situation doesn't really need me. I'm just going to go back to my life. I'm going to go focus all this awesome brain power I have on making as much money as I can, building a nest for my family. This shit will work itself out. Whatever. Doesn't need me. That's black pilling, guys. Like, just so we're clear, like that's what actual black, like sitting here and crying on the internet because you're not happy with like what is happening in the world. That's not black pilling. Right. You're still like invested enough to make posts on the internet and talk about it. You're not black pilled yet. Black pilling is literally just walking away and saying, I don't care anymore. Like, do whatever you want. That's
it. I think that's a good thing to bring up, because I don't think we actually talk about that a lot. We do use the term blackpilling and dooming and that sort of thing. Dooming is different. Dooming is what I would call what you said about, you know, posting on the internet. That's like dooming or doom posting.
That's dooming. That's dooming.
Yeah.
Not blackpilling. Blackpilling is very different. Yeah.
Yeah. Dooming is like you are trying to spread your demoralization to other people, or you're actively trying to demoralize other people. And to your point, I had said before the show, and I've kind of mentioned this, but the way you frame that actually makes me think of myself from 2010, 11.
Pre-Trump.
I've said it.
Pre-Trump
politics.
Pre-Trump.
Yeah. Pre-Trump, I was I always call it a disillusioned liberal, but what that means is blackpilling. And to Ghost's point, in hindsight, it wasn't that I was stupid. You know, I didn't know the things I know now, but I was pretty damn engaged. I went all the way down the 9/11 rabbit holes when I was 14 years old. Like I watched every Alex Jones documentary, like I was watching Bohemian Grove shit. I was into all that stuff. I was reading about the history of the Federal Reserve and following Ron Paul. He was the only Republican that I would give the time of day when I was like a card-carrying liberal, but I liked Ron Paul. Voted for Obama, jumped on that rug. I've talked about that a million times. When I blackpilled on Obama, it wasn't like I just thought, man, I don't understand anything that's going on, and I'm just going to get out of this whole thing. It was the opposite. I more went, it is so much worse than I even thought it was, and I'm going to go kickbox now. Yeah. And like it literally launched me into kickboxing, which I was doing like on the side. And I was like, I'm going to get as much brain damage as possible over as short a time period as possible, to just like not care about this shit anymore. Yeah. And like that, to your point, blackpilling, like it's an active choice to disengage from caring about this kind of stuff.
One of the people I was doing this with went to go work for McKinsey Consulting, which is like, that's like the firm that plans the wars and like does all the things and like
the real ones and the fake ones.
Yeah. They're like, you know what? Like I know all this shit about the world, like how the world actually works. Why not go use that knowledge to go make like six figures?
Yeah. Who's making the money? Yeah.
Working for the bad guys. Like who fucking cares? Like y'all are going to do this shit anyway.
My cousin went from military intelligence. My cousin, a MAGA guy, went from military intelligence to Halliburton. Or no, Raytheon.
Yeah.
Afterwards. And he was like, guys, I work in a skiff in Raytheon. Like it is what it is.
Like look at all your favorite researchers online, the people who you think are actually like really good at this stuff, who like do their own research and like put this stuff together in good presentations. Any of those people, like, you know, with a clean record could probably go work for the bad guys easily and make a shitload of money doing it. Way more money than we're making doing this shit.
I don't know, Gross. I've heard we make like $500,000 a second. But hey, every once in a while, I consider looking at job postings and being like, game theory, pattern recognition. How useful are these things?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you tell me, guys, would you rather have like all those people like working for McKinsey and working for these consulting firms, like doing that shit? Or would you rather have them like out here, like doing this sort of analysis in real time or like live or sharing this information with like the public and then allowing us all to have conversations about it? I mean, that seems like a way more fruitful use of that talent that is like benefiting humanity and benefiting mankind, right? I mean, that's where I thought we were all going with this. Like that's where I think all of us 5 years ago felt what we were doing is like we were people who were not interested in politics were coming out of the shadows and getting interested in politics because a new world was emerging, and we were like going to help build that new world by like sharing information, sharing data, sharing research, and then like constructing a new narrative of what the world could be if we actually push towards that, right? But that requires us from departing from the old world and throwing the old world away in some respects, like the old world meaning the world that the deep state created, the world that the establishment created, right? Which has not happened yet, not even close. Like we are nowhere close to balling up the deep state into a little paper ball and throwing it in the trash. Like that has not. We're not even close to that. Like that's a pipe dream.
Well, they certainly don't think so. I mean, the way that they're acting. John Drake just shot over a rant I wanted to grab. He said, caveat regarding blackpilling. Blackpilling can also be trying the same things that haven't ever worked before and hoping that this time they will, i.e. vote harder.
That's true.
That's almost like
insanity.
Man, I don't know if I'd say that's blackpilling. That's almost like passive blackpilling, I guess, in some ways. It's like unknowing blackpilling. I think of blackpilling more as like, as Ghost was saying, a choice is made. Like I remember the day. I literally remember the day. And shout out to a liberal professor who blackpilled me on the Obama administration. It was the second campaign, and he put up on his little whiteboard there, the front of the room. He knew he was going to have a partisan audience in Massachusetts, and he put up on his little whiteboard the top donors to a presidential campaign. He wrote 10 companies on the board, and it was like, Halliburton, Raytheon, ExxonMobil, all these things, right? Defense contractors, oil companies, that sort of thing, conglomerates. And he wrote 10 companies on the board, and then he started putting numbers next to them. So, he'd have Halliburton on the board, and on one side of it, he'd put a 1, and on the other side of it, he'd put like a 5. And then he started doing that with every company on the board. So then he goes, hey, which list of donors do you guys think I just put down? In other words, whose donors do you think these are? Do you think these are donors for Romney, or do you think these are donors for Obama? And of course, it was a trick question. And the reason he put those numbers on the board is because all 10 companies that he had written had donated to both campaigns through various super PACs, but the contribution amounts were designated in order of based on where they were. So the defense contractors really liked Romney, and the energy company, or it was the opposite. The energy companies really liked Romney, and the defense contractors really liked Obama, which was kind of weird because Obama was supposed to be like the peace president, but Halliburton really liked him before he became president. And that was a good, I literally remember walking home from class and just being like, oh, well, fuck me, I guess. And those are clarifying moments. It can feel dooming. And I think, we've talked about, to your point about when things felt different to us in the last decade, one of the gifts that Donald Trump has given a lot of us, former liberals, former conservatives, whatever, libertarians, was this idea that, oh, maybe we can change this shit. So, this seems to be a contradiction of that kind of stuff, but I really do have a hard time thinking he's gone away from that stuff. But to your point, I understand why there's a lot of people even in chat saying like, yeah, a lot of normie friends of mine are like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on here? And And I'm working on a whole other concept that I'm going to write soon called Trump the Trustless, where I am playing with the idea more and more of, in addition to the actual Patriot plans that we talk about and theorize about, from Q drops to Devo to Sovereign Alliance, in addition to that, is there a larger mass psychological and philosophical plan unfolding wherein Donald Trump is actually not trying to resuscitate trust in the American government, but he is kind of burning that trust down on his way through the building? You know, like, it's possible that this stuff gets reversed in the central narrative, but it's possible it does not. And, you know, you're not going to get any liberal in the United States ever on board with this kind of a narrative. And I know a lot of people in the audience are going to be like, well, fuck him. And that's fine if you feel that way. I'm just saying that wasn't what you were saying a few years ago. What you were saying a few years ago was the unity president, right? The unifier. And now it's become fuck them libs, right? Like, that's kind of, I've definitely noticed that in 2025 and 26, a lot of people who used to use terminology we use, like uniparty and establishment and deep state, they're not using those words a lot anymore. They're using the libs, the left, the Dems. So apparently we're back to fighting those kind of people.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. And it's, again, like, you know, bigger plan at play. Sure. Of course. I'm sure there is. More information to come to light. Yeah. Like, again, I'm not drawing hard conclusions right now. I'm remaining completely open-minded. Want to see more information. Want to see more. I want to see how this unfolds. Definitely want to see how Pezeshkian and Arakchi react to all this in the coming weeks and what the fallout from all this was. I mean, shit. I think it was on Friday. On Friday, I put in the news brief. There was a story of they met in Geneva. The Iranian negotiators and Kushner and Wickoff.
Yeah.
All met in Geneva to talk about the deal. And one of the stories that came out of it from the Financial Times was that the Iranians were going to offer like all the resources, oil, gas, rare earth, all kind of piggybacking off on Venezuela. And I was like, dude, I've been saying this for weeks, but wouldn't it be great if the thing that broke out of this whole Iran narrative was like a giant trade deal? Like if Trump came out and was like, we're going to make so much money together, we're going to be an economic, that would have been like art of the deal shit. To me, that would have been a crazy ending that would have, really resonated, signified the coming of the golden age, the coming of if America and Iran can cut a deal like that, anyone can cut a deal. That's the piece that I think we're looking for. And that could still happen. I get that. Yeah. That could still happen. But this is obviously a strange detour to get there. I don't believe in the bomb your way to peace. I know there are people who think that if you just kill enough people, you can make peace. I personally don't think that that's a thing. I think the bomb your way to peace is a stupid idea. It's definitely come up with people who make bullets for a living, who make munitions for a living. They're the ones who come up with those kind of ideas. You can't bomb your way to peace. You make peace by making peace, not by killing people to coerce them into making peace.
You're actually mistaken, Ghost. There's a very quick clip I want to play. This is by a character literally named Peacemaker, who would probably be the expert on how to make peace. So I think you should listen to what he has to say.
That's where they're holding flag.
Nothing like a bloodbath to start the day.
They call you Peacemaker.
I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I need to kill to get it.
That's just
exactly.
One of my...
exactly. Yeah.
That is a lot of Twitter right now. A lot of Twitter.
How many men, women, and children I have to kill.
And I said I'm going to white pill the fuck out of everybody, and it might be hopium. That's fine.
Was that Captain Israel? That must be Captain Israel.
Yeah, basically. But I am going to white pill Carpet Bomb. But that's because, in keeping with this show, and it's consistent, it may be consistently wrong, but I do, and Chris, Chris and I are very aligned on a lot of these things. Obviously, not everything, but I do genuinely believe that a lot more of what we watch is theater, and that isn't to say that I don't think anything's going on here. It's not to say that I don't think that there's regime change in the offing. It's just to say that I think there's a lot of amplification of the narratives. And to your point about kind of waiting and checking ourselves, the 72-hour rule gets talked about a lot. We're not even at that mark. It's kind of crazy to think. I didn't have power for even longer than that. But we're not even at the 72-hour rule. And I don't look at the 72-hour rule to look at what actually happened. Like, that's not how I use that. That's how I think a lot of people use it. They're like, well, after 3, 4, 5 days, we have a clearer picture of what happened. I don't believe that. I actually believe the opposite. I believe that every day that goes by, the more the establishment and the storytellers have to get on the same page about how they're lying to us. So, but here's how I have reverse engineered that into a way I approach the info war. When 72 hours has gone by, everyone does start to solidify their narratives, right? The Trump team starts to solidify it. Now, granted, the Trump team's narratives, they started the narrative and the actual. So that's important. They weren't reacting to a narrative, they set the narrative. The rest of the battle space reacts to the narrative. What I look for with the 72-hour rule is how have the narrative setters around Trump, or the reactors to Trump's narrative setting, have they changed their tunes at all? And I do want to give a shout out to Chris. Speaking of Chris, he just tagged me on this in the back end on Badlands. Just early indicators. I'm not saying that they're conclusive, but early indicators. John Bolton is just about, I would argue that John Bolton in the War of Stories is representative of a Warhawk incarnate, right? Like,
yeah.
If you think Warhawk, that is the guy you think of. You would think that John Bolton on the back of the last 48 hours is getting his heart's desire.
Yeah.
And John Bolton has quickly shifted his view entering Sunday night and is now saying, I'm not sure I like what Trump is doing here. John Bolton sounds the alarm on Trump's Iran gamble. In an exclusive, Trump's one-time national security advisor warns the strike on Iran may deepen conflict, create a dangerous power vacuum, and plunge the region into turmoil. And the reason I think that that's notable isn't just the reverse indicator game. I think that's important. But it's to say, everything he lists there as a fear are the things that John Bolton lives for. He lives for the creation of power vacuums. He lives for the perpetuation of war and regime change and Western hegemon. Like, he's the poster boy for that. So it doesn't mean I know what's going on. And it doesn't mean that I think we have more clarity after 48 hours. But I do think it's interesting to watch how people are starting to react to Trump's deployment here, right? Like, a lot of these guys who first 6-12 hours are like, let's go, we got him, bag him and tag him. They're now kind of saying like, I don't know. I don't really like what's going on here. So I just think it's notable, if nothing else.
That is encouraging. That is encouraging to see that John Bolton has trepidation here, because I would fully have expected him to be in ecstasy right now over what's happening. Now, granted, he is like facing serious criminal prosecution at the hands of Trump. Yeah. So yeah, there's that. I will address a few things I'm seeing in the chat. Number one, I see someone in the chat saying, why can't it be like Venezuela, where we take out the bad leaders and work with the good leaders? Au contraire, my friend. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but Nicolas Maduro and Delcy Rodriguez are like this. Delcy Rodriguez is literally, as of like a few days ago, said Nicolas Maduro is still the legitimate president of Venezuela. I'm just keeping his seat warm. We haven't changed a fucking thing here in Caracas. Like, we're actually doing the exact same thing that he told us to do. The only thing that's changed is that people like you think that something has changed. So Trump can move forward and say, all right, we're lifting all the sanctions. We're selling oil to everybody. everything's back to normal. Everyone can be nice to Venezuela now. We can just like move forward. But nothing has actually changed with the government. It's all the exact same people doing the exact same thing, actually following written orders that Maduro's left for them. In my absence, here's what I want y'all to do.
I've got you, Ghost. I fucking got you. So with the understanding that this may change within the next 24 hours, we may have a new carpet bombing of these new towel heads. But what do you know of the current new regime guys that are replacing the outgoing annihilated regime? The last I saw is that they've got Ali Reza Arafi is interim champion right now, to use a Trumpomania term. I don't know if that'll last, but it makes me think of Operation Absolute Resolve and everything you just said there to say that's my first big white pill attempt. My gut says we are looking at a narrative regime change, but if we start digging into the actuals of the new Iranian regime, does it look to you like it's different than the other Iranian regime? You know way more about all these different players.
Well, I haven't really been tracking like the minute by minute on what's happening with like who's being killed. What I can tell, like the story that we were told is that these people all got in a room together, the Ayatollah and like the top 40 members of the IRGC. And it's important. I was telling Alpha earlier, it's important to know that in Middle Eastern culture, when they say 40, that's the same thing as us saying dozens. So like, 40 days and 40 nights, 40 years in the desert, Alibaba and the 40 thieves. That's just a term they use to mean, it can mean 60, it can mean 20, it can mean 100. Yeah. So they said Ayatollah and the 40 top members got into a room together to discuss, I presume, like the terms of this deal that Kushner and Wickoff presented, and then that's where they bombed. They hit them and they killed all of them. I personally think the Ayatollah has been dead for years. I've said this for a long time. He was on hospice care. Like the official narrative is that he was, as I understand it, is that he was on hospice care during the 12-day war. I distinctly remember last June there being pictures circulating of him in the hospital, like in a hospital bed. What's absolutely certain is that they restructured the IRGC during that time to remove the Ayatollah from the chain of command and to turn it over to the generals and the intelligence officers. And then they did devolution in August, where they created the Defense Council and they devolved the powers of the government to the governors in the 31 provinces. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, you should go read about it. I published it weeks ago in the Badlands Substack in one of the news briefs.
So Iranian devolution.
Yes.
And on that note, you continue, but Prophet just sent over a relevant rant. $20. How do you know the Ayatollah and his 40 senior officials aren't in WITSEC? And it doesn't have to be WITSEC, but to your point, I think it lends. It's interesting when you're talking about hospice and all this kind of stuff. Maduro, you predicted him being extracted. Your reading was it would be an extraction, right? Yep. And when people get bogged down, I think, in how do you know it was an extraction versus real earnest regime change against Maduro? We don't. But the template that Ghost built, the theory that he built, was premised on a friendly extraction. When that then happens, to me, it makes it more likely that premise is being codified, right, and reflected, rather than a different earnest regime change op is happening here. So to your point, when I'm saying, hey, do we have another case of regime change to the same regime? Some of what you're talking about and what Prophet just mentions there, it lends credence to the idea that while it's not identical to Maduro, you've got the announcement of death here. There is a way to read this as, actually, this is much ado about nothing on an actual level in terms of the changeover of leadership.
Yeah, so the Maduro thing was unique because I had already been saying for a year and a half that Maduro was working with us was working with Trump and had been working with Trump since March of at least March of 2018, if not sooner. And that was because he was handed the laptop from hell in March of 2017. And basically, he was the one who kicked off the whole war against the deep state, where we went around and started arresting all these executives at Glencore and Trafigura and Vital and all these different places. Maduro started that entire thing. I also said that Maduro was in a war against the cartels, that Maduro was fighting the cartels, that he was working with Colombian President Gustavo Petro, fighting the cartels. Both of those people, by the way, Trump has publicly identified as the leaders of the cartel. We now know for a fact that that's not true, that Gustavo Petro and Trump are working together against the cartels. And by the way, the whole thing in Mexico, I don't know if you've talked about this at all in your shows, but, like we killed El Mencho, right? Last week in Mexico. Well, the New York Post put out an article this week. Pam Bondi held a press conference. I don't know if you saw that, but Pam Bondi actually said, so what Petro and the Venezuelan leaders all said was that 1 year ago, in February of 2025, Maduro proposed a joint operation with Gustavo Petro of Colombia against the cartels. And then Gustavo Petro went to the White House in February 2026 and made that same proposal to Trump. And then the Venezuelan officials got a little angry because they were like, wait a minute, that was our idea. Like, we wanted to do that. And Petro reposted and said, yes, it was your idea. Credit where it's due. Pam Bondi came out and said, hey, we've actually been working with all these people for the past year, and we have 92 cartel bosses in our possession because 3 shipments, one came last month, the other one came in August of 2025. The first shipment came in February of 2025 from Mexico. And apparently, according to Pam Bondi, Mexico was making those requests during the Biden administration. They were like, hey, we have all these cartel bosses that we want to ship up to y'all. Can y'all take them?
We got them
the Biden administration was like, no, we don't want them. Yeah. So that was Maduro, that was Gustavo Petro, that was Mexico, all going after the cartels together, while your State Department was telling you that these people were all the heads of the cartel. So my point is that your government fucking lies to you every single day about every single aspect of your reality. So maybe we shouldn't believe them when they come out and they are waving the American flag and are saying, we got them, guys. It's like, let's wait and see.
I totally agree with that. And ironically, that is a big part of my white pill here, is that I don't believe the government, especially when it's Trump. And that's a good thing. In that, my initial take on this, which is going to go into, part of that's going to go into tomorrow's brief. It reminded me of Operation Midnight Hammer and Operation Absolute Resolve. It reminded me of the Bunker Buster. For anybody who doesn't know the names, that was the Bunker Buster from June 2025 on the takeout of the Iran nuclear facilities, and it was the Maduro op. It reminds me of those operations from a narrative perspective. And again, I'm retarded, so the way I look at these things tends to be through narrative structure, tends to be through plot structure. And when I'm looking at these, one of the major my sort of major takeaway from Operation Midnight Hammer was that what were the net effects of that situation? The net effects were whatever the actuals, which everybody argued about for days. And remember, it took Donald Trump a long time to get the war hawks and the warmongers on board with the reality that he had struck the nuclear facilities. So the first thing I put out in that take yesterday was, I don't know what the fuck is going on, as Ghost led the show with, but let's keep an eye on the next 48-hour news cycle, and let's see who immediately rushes to codify the narrative that Donald Trump is telling about Operation Epic Fury, and who starts to question Operation Epic Fury. And by that, I do not mean the morality of the operation. I'm saying who endorses the plot and who questions the plot. At Midnight Hammer, a lot of people were not paying attention to the plot structure there. When Midnight Hammer happened, The Trump administration set the narrative, right? We bombed an Iranian nuclear facility. This is what happened. It was totally obliterated. Who was the second actor to codify Donald Trump's narrative of what happened with Midnight Hammer? Iran. Iran was the second, and I mean like big player, who would be relevant. Somebody else in the Trump administration saying it doesn't matter because it's the same fucking thing, right? Iran came to the board and said, yep, he frickin' bamboozled us. He totally took out our nuclear facilities and we're so stinking mad about it. Israel and the mainstream media and the alt media ran around in circles for about 48 hours saying, we actually don't know if this strike was successful, nor do we think it really matters or leads to the effects that Donald Trump was saying. And my takeaway there, some people might say, like, what's it matter? What's it matter if Trump and Iran agreed about this and some of these other players in the media were skeptical of Midnight Hammer? What matters is what was the effect of Trump's story. If Israel or if Iran doesn't have the capability to create nuclear weapons, Israel's impetus for invading Iran or carpet bombing them goes away.
Yep.
And obviously this narrative, Epic Fury, would seemingly refute that. But I can't help but notice my prediction I put out yesterday was a narrative prediction. It was not an actual prediction. I said, let's see if Iran comes to the table and confirms Donald Trump's claims about the Ayatollah. And let's see who questions Donald Trump's claims about the Ayatollah. Well, the first group to officially confirm Donald Trump's narrative about the Ayatollah was Iran. Iranian state media confirms the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, 40 days in mourning, etc. They weren't the only ones, but they were the first major player. You had, for 12 hours after this, a lot of alt media and a lot of mainstream media and a lot of neocons questioning whether or not they actually got him. And all of this is not to say I know or care whether or not they got him. It's to say it says something when in both of these Iranian operations, Donald Trump and Iran agree on what happened.
Yeah.
Everybody else
very notable
doesn't really seem to agree on what happened. And I find that notable. Now, I will say, to poke a hole in this of Operation Midnight Hammer, Israel was not on board with the narrative of Midnight Hammer early on.
They kept sending planes. They kept sending planes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
They seemingly have been on board with Trump's narrative on Epic Fury. So that is a difference that I want to point out. I'm not trying to be hypocritical. There is a difference. But I'm just saying, to me, it is notable who is setting the narrative, or rather, Donald Trump is deploying the narrative. Who is setting the narrative? To me, a narrative needs to be set. It needs to be codified from the other direction of a plot. And that's how you get a narrative set. The narrative set is Iran in both cases. If you think that this is all horrible, no matter what, this doesn't matter. These are semantics ultimately, right? Of like, yeah, Trump is doing this really bad thing. Iran is confirming that Trump is doing this really bad thing. I'm saying from a plot structure perspective, I think it's notable that Iran is like, yep, he got us again. He whacked us. And you want to always look for why, if the media wants this, right? To your earlier trepidation and a lot of our immediate reactions to this stuff, if the media and the warmongers all want this, and if they think it's going to lead to the end result that they've been, basically stumping for decades, why are they not in a rush to codify Trump's story? And, I have my leanings on why, but I think that it's notable. And I think the Bolton thing there that Chris sent over is also notable because it leads me to believe we're entering the 48-hour-ish mark, or not even. We're like 36 hours in here. And some of these neophytes, some of these neocons are seemingly starting to question the realities of what's going on the ground over there.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's definitely a good point. It is interesting. I want to address the Iranian leadership question that you asked, but before I do, I just want to point this out. So this is the article I was referring to. And again, guys, like everyone who thinks they have a firm read on like what's happening everywhere because we just believe everything that our government tells us at all times. This is a pretty big deviation from like what we've been told for the past couple of years about what's going on. Pam Bondi's been like one of those people who is just like being obsessively, ardently talking about how evil like these regimes are in Central and South America. And here she is openly telling you, I mean, first of all, it says many of these 92 defendants, these are cartel leaders. These were extradition requests that were not honored by the Biden administration. So there you go. Right here. Here's the quote from Pam Bondi. As President Trump has made clear, cartels are terrorist groups, and this Department of Justice is devoted to destroying cartels and transnational gangs, said Attorney General Pam Bondi of the transfers, which kicked off last February. So we literally, like within 2 weeks of Trump getting into office, he was receiving cartel leaders on airplanes from Mexico. And these are the same cartel leaders that were being chased out of Colombia by Gustavo Petro. I don't believe for a second the narrative that like the prisons were being emptied. That narrative doesn't make any sense, because what that would mean is that they put the cartel people, the MS-13 people, in prison to begin with, and then suddenly decided, oh, well, Biden's president now, let's let him out of prison. That doesn't make any sense. What happens is, I think, is that Gustavo Petro got into office in 2022, and we know for a fact started firing artillery shells into the jungle and blowing up boats in the water, just like Trump's been doing for the past year, or says he's been doing. And that's what drove all of them north out of Colombia and into Central America and into America, like into the U.S., into Mexico, all that. So what was actually happening during the Biden administration? Well, maybe there was a game of chase all the cartel people up through Central America, and then the Mexicans are all sitting there waiting for them.
Pincer. Yeah,
to grab them, right? Which is things that were speculated. I know you've speculated that over the years on your shows, that maybe something to that effect was happening. But, you know, this is a pretty big deviation from like the official narrative that even like Trump was telling us, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And let's go back to the leadership on Iran, because, and I do think that this situation you're bringing up with the cartels is relevant, because the bottom line is, I think what we could all agree on is that the deep state, as we've come to describe it, is a global cabal or cartel, right? Like, to be as simple as possible. It's a global and globalist cartel that has financial, political, and kinetic arms and factions all throughout the globe. And the irony in this situation with Iran is that we're being told that this is part of that same global cartel being taken down, but it looks like some of the people that people like us and people like Ghost think of as cartel, like the warmongers, the warhawks, and the neocons, cartel adjacent, cartel endorsing, deep state, they seem happy with this. And I mentioned the similarities plot-wise to Midnight Hammer, but I think there's actually some similar plot realities to Absolute Resolve as well. You mentioned Maduro. So my big theory during that was not just everything you said about Maduro being extracted and all that. My theory was Operation Absolute Resolve was a fake regime change op in order to halt a real regime change op.
Yeah, exactly.
And that one was way cleaner. I'm admitting here, this is not as clean, what's going on with Iran, but I see similarities. In Venezuela, we've talked about Hakuna Matata, Maria Corina Machado, the NGOs that were backing her for literally a decade. She was involved in voting, all this kind of stuff, right? Endorsed by Soros, endorsed by the World Economic Forum, supported by the National Endowment for Democracy. That might as well be the triple threat right there. There were color revolution after color revolution attempt going on and being fomented in Venezuela. What happens when all ghost reporting on Delcy Rodriguez? She comes in there, and what does that do? It stops the Maria Corina Machado globalist regime change job in its tracks. And I said this when it was happening. I said, watch Maria Corina Machado and her handlers attempt to test the waters for a new regime change a week after the regime change. And you were the first one who posted the clip of Machado on Fox News like 4 days after they took Maduro out, calling for a new regime change on Delcy Rodriguez. And now people might think, well, why does that matter? Like Burning Bright, why does it matter if they're calling for another one? Isn't that bad? No, it's not bad. Did she get it? Did Machado get the second regime change? No. Why? It's not just actual power projection. She had no mandate. Because when Trump gets the whole collective mind, especially in Venezuela, that was the irony of all the people telling us, we know people in Venezuela, they're very excited. Yes, Donald Trump is using that and telling the people of Venezuela who have been the subject of a color revolution, which, guys, a color revolution is psychological first. It's psychological primarily. The last stage of it is a kinetic operation and a coup. Most of it is psychological. The Venezuelan people are the most brainwashed about what's going on in their own government. The same way an American is the last person you should ask what was going on during the Obama administration. Because they don't fucking know. They're the subject of the psychological warfare operations. That's not talking about truth community people, right? So when you don't have the mandate for regime change, you don't get it. So my concept of absolute resolve was that Trump gave him a regime change, but to all your reporting, it wasn't really a regime change. But the story was that it was a regime change. So now let's look at Iran and just try those goggles on, because, and this is too early. This is too early to know. But in the early going, there's at least some similarities there, where if Donald Trump makes a deal that you mentioned a little while ago, which he is at least signaling, I've agreed to talk, he says in an exclusive with The Atlantic. He's talking about the new Iranian leaders. Now, this might not happen. We might get told about new bombs on these guys, right? But the story is being set in a similar way. And if we tie this back into, sorry for the belabored point, if we tie this back into John Bolton, why would John Bolton be upset? Could it at all be in a similar vein to the dueling color revolutions we talked about in Venezuela? Are the power players starting to recognize or suspect that the color revolution going on, or the regime change that's going on in Iran right now, is not the one that their color revolution in Iran was going for? And that's what I'm most interested to see how it develops over the next, Trump said 4 weeks, is he put a timeline on this one. So it's a bit longer, but I think that's a big thing to watch.
Yeah, no, that is really, really interesting. And yeah, I mean, we'll have to see if that's the way that works out. And again, is the war real? Is the war a narrative? Like that, like those are questions that will maybe will become more clear. Maybe they won't in time. I definitely think the way people react to this stuff is a big indicator as to like what's happening, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to share my screen, I'll just kind of do a little quick demonstration here. So this first guy is Hassan Rouhani. He was the president of Iran from 2013 to 2021. Okay. Look at the way he's dressed. He's a mullah. He was a mullah, or he is a mullah. He's still alive. Out of office in 2021. And then we get Ibrahim Raisi. You'll notice, once again, dressed the same way. He's a mullah, right? These are guys from like the religious, extremist wing, right, of Iran. He's president from 2021 to 2024. He was famously killed in the helicopter crash in northern Iran, right? They then hold an election, and we get This guy, Pezeshkian, Masoud Pezeshkian, a heart surgeon, a moderate, a reformer, right? Notice the way he dresses. Not a religious extremist.
Yeah.
Not a zealot. Not a mullah. This is 2024. They let this guy run for office. He wins, and then they let him take power. So, when people talk about, well, we need regime change in Iran because they're just too crazy. They're extreme. They're insane. They're maybe. But they let this guy take power in 2024, a heart surgeon. And he's been the one who's been running around leading the country ever since. And he's been cutting all these deals with Russia and doing golden age stuff and sovereign alliance stuff with Russia and China. He normalized relations with Saudi Arabia, or at least was on the path to do that. They were engaging in diplomacy and talking with all of the Arab countries. He was doing all that stuff. So these are people we can't speak to. Like, we can't, find common ground with these kind of guys. I don't believe that. Now, the IRGC is a different thing. Like, that is a different segment. The civilian leadership of the country is this guy, and then the foreign minister is Arakchi. The IRGC is like comes out of the 1979 revolution, and that's all. That's the Ayatollah. That's all the people they're talking about being killed off. So, are we just getting a narrative of like, here's a convenient way to explain to the world why the Ayatollah is dead? Here's a convenient way to explain to the world why the IRGC is no longer running shit in Iran. Maybe, like, that could be. Again, I personally think we haven't seen the Ayatollah in like a year.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't made public appearances. He hasn't made any statements. We've been told that he's made statements on paper.
Right.
But there's no video of him. There's no pictures of him. There's no audio. There's no nothing. And in the age of like AI, like, they could do that if they wanted to, right?
Yeah.
My theory is that they don't want to replace him. Is that they basically want to keep him alive, just like they're keeping George Soros alive. That guy's definitely dead, right? I mean, George Soros, come on, like, is he really still alive? I don't think so. But they want to keep him alive long enough that they don't have to say, oh, well, we need a new Ayatollah now, right?
Right.
Long enough for like these guys like Pezeshkian to kind of normalize things and get them on a new track. And then people aren't even thinking about the Ayatollah. They're not even thinking about the IRGC. That's what it seemed like they were doing. Like that's what I thought Iran was on, like their path that they were on. Now, again, maybe Trump is on that path with them. And this whole like detour for war is just a convenient way to explain to the Israeli religious zealots and the Christian religious zealots, who both are like chomping at the bit to kill as many people as they possibly can in a giant war, holy war. Maybe this is a convenient way to like scratch that itch for them and let them understand how all these people got rid of them. Maybe. But I think it's just important to point out that like there were people in Iran who were running the country ostensibly. I mean, maybe there were people who were stopping them from doing everything they needed to do. Maybe taking out the bad twin in Iran was necessary. I mean, who knows? These are questions that I don't have the answer to. But the idea that there weren't any reasonable people in the room in Iran, I patently false. I mean, I can point to these people and say they were cutting deals with Putin, they were cutting deals with Xi, they were cutting deals with the other Muslims who they did not get along with for 40 years. Well,
that's why, a lot of these guys are still on the board. And that's why I'm saying, we don't know where this is going. But if it does run along a similar narrative template specifically to Venezuela, then it will be interesting if we get a Delcy Rodriguez situation.
Yeah.
Where the players, a lot of the players you talk about that are common knowledge to you and people who really have studied this theater are not to the normie hive mind, right? Just like Delcy Rodriguez, you knew that name. The vast majority of InfoWar people didn't even know that name. Never mind the normie hive mind. So, all the stuff we led the show off with, that's true about how this stuff hits the normie hive mind, mostly negatively. The good thing about that is that these people have not been following who's been making the deals and everything. The reason I bring that up is when Delcy Rodriguez was named the new leader of Venezuela, 99% of the collective mind sees that as Delcy Rodriguez, new leader of Venezuela, right? They don't see, wait a second, this is just the Maduro regime. We knew that. We knew it was just the Maduro regime. And it works narratively. It works for Trump and the Sovereign Alliance, which was our whole framing of the Delcy Rodriguez thing. You know, some of us still thought, hey, let's see if she gets swapped out quickly as well. That didn't happen. And I think that was actually very encouraging. Trump was like, I think I can work with her, right? And we started to think, hey, this is perfect. Trump gets the narrative regime change. He rug pulls the globalist regime change, and he still has effectively a regime in there that he can make deals with. So it's like win-win-win all around. And that new regime, even though we know, and people who are plugged into this stuff know that she's part of the old regime, the way that that was translated is that she, either most people don't know she was part of the old regime, or there's that whole story that she was the one who sold out Maduro. Like she took him down from the inside. So when you're talking about Pezeshkian and some of these other players, we have the interim champ, who I mentioned earlier. I lost the thread there. Arafki or whatever his name was.
Arafki, yeah.
Yeah. These people might be part of the same.
He's not the interim champ. He's the foreign minister. He has been for 2 years.
Okay. But either way, the leadership of Iran may end up looking like a lot of the same figures that you've been tracking for years and following through these sovereign alliance deals. So when you've got Trump coming out here with this extremely bombastic and dramatic actual and narrative and talking about regime change and, you know, but then a day later he's saying, well, we could still make a deal as long as, you know, they come to the table and I like what I see. It's a way more aggressive form maybe of what we saw with Venezuela, but I still think it could follow the same template. If he does end up making a deal with these regime players, these interim regime players, then what were we really looking at here? To your point about the Ayatollah, you know, then were we looking at a regime change? Or were we just looking at the narrative of a regime change? And then one more point on that would be, Chris mentioned this. He used this terminology that I think we were on the Blitz and we were talking about it. He used it I think it was in the context of the alien disclosure stuff that Trump was talking about last week. But Chris said, Trump's, in a private chat, Chris said, Trump's letting all the air out of the balloons. And I love the way that was, right? And to me, if you want to look at this, why is John Bolton and who John Bolton's represents upset when they are supposedly getting the on-ramp to the next forever war? Most of the normie hive mind thinks that we are on that ramp.
Yep.
And just my gut reaction is 2 times in the last 9 months with Midnight Hammer and Absolute Resolve, we have seen Donald Trump let the air out of the balloons. He's given the central narrative the kinetic escalation that it expected, and then almost immediately afterwards, there's an off-ramp to further escalation. We're now doing energy deals with Venezuela. And are we going to have a nuclear deal done with Iran within the month? But it's all the same Iranian figures who we're being told are the enemy right now? Because that's going to be funny. Because if that happens, and that's my bet, that I'm saying it like on the record, I think that's what's going to happen. We're going to get all the warmongers basically think that they got this big war and they got what they wanted when the forever war is actually averted.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I know a bunch of people in the chat have been saying, well, isn't this a good opportunity for Trump to like take this thing off the chessboard for Israel? Like they can't point to Iran as like this boogeyman anymore. Kind of think that's what Operation Midnight Hammer was supposed to be last year, frankly. Right. But not so fast, because this was last week. This guy, Naftali Bennett, is the favorite to replace Netanyahu. They're going to have an election in October for prime minister. He's already been prime minister. He was prime minister for 6 months in 2022. Netanyahu actually had to move heaven and earth and go get those crazy religious zealots in his corner in order to remove this guy from office and become prime minister again. But here's what he said last week.
A new Turkish threat is emerging. I want to be very clear. Turkey and Qatar have gained influence in Syria, are seeking influence elsewhere and everywhere throughout the region. And from here, I warn, Turkey is the new Iran. Erdogan is sophisticated, dangerous, and he seeks to encircle Israel. And while some senior Israelis were on Qatar's payroll, Qatar and Turkey are nourishing the Islamic Brotherhood monster that is growing and eventually might become as dangerous as the one created by Iran. Turkey and Qatar are gaining influence not only in Syria, but also in Gaza, through the front door, and everywhere, and trying to create a new choke ring. Turkey is trying to flip Saudi Arabia against us and establish a hostile Sunni axis with nuclear Pakistan.
Yeah. So if you thought this was going to end at Iran, do I have
certainly not what they
special for
want?
you? Yeah. From the people who brought you war with Iran, how about war with Turkey?
It's good that you bring that up though, because this is basically, that's going to test the thesis, right? So if I've got a thesis here that Trump is letting the air out of the balloon, to use the Chris Paulism, he is taking the energy, he's drafting off of the color revolution that the globalists have had in the offing. He's giving them the coup de grace there. And then we take an off ramp is my prediction. We do make a deal. We don't get the forever war and the expansion of a new series of wars over there. I might be totally wrong about that. That will test the thesis though, right? Because if he does make a deal and it avoids what you just played there, and this escalation with Turkey and the rest of the region, that would map onto the reading that they think they're getting what they want here. That's what's, I think, ironic about our readings here, is that they're actually not contradictory. We just don't know which one is going to win out the day. Your reading that the worst players on the board are excited right now is true. But my point is, they think they're getting what they want right now, but they've got the opening salvo of what they want. Just like there were a lot of people like Warhawks and neocons that thought they were getting what they wanted with Maduro, right? We saw a lot of the same. It wasn't the same rhetoric because, as you know better than anybody, the Iran-Israel sort of energy and history, politics, geopolitics, culture, religion, there's a lot behind that. So people get really involved with rooting interest there, right? Not the same thing with Venezuela, but we did see the regime change boys and the neocons and all that get super pumped up about Trump's regime change in Venezuela. And then within a week, he was making oil deals and they didn't get an escalation, right? So it's going to be, this might take a little longer than 72 hours, but I'm really interested to see a lot of the reporting that you bring into the brief in particular over the next week and change, because I want to see if some of these players you've been tracking, particularly in Israel, start to question how Trump is handling the aftermath, right? Or we did see this back with Midnight Hammer. Does Trump start reprimanding Israel in the aftermath of this, right? Like sometimes what Trump does is he'll start putting the overtures out there of deal making and let's go back to the table. And then he'll reprimand our so-called allies for escalating in those kinds of situations. So we could see something like that play out too.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that guy, like in that same speech, so that guy, when he mentions Turkey and Qatar, remember, he's calling out Trump in that speech. Like we should understand that Trump's the one who backed Turkey and Syria.
Yeah.
When Assad fled, which was again another one of these like controlled extraction moments with the Sovereign Alliance. Trump was the one who took to True Social immediately. This is December of 24, and he said, "I want to congratulate my buddy Erdogan. Like, what a major achievement! Toppling Syria, taking Syria, fantastic." The Israelis were pissed when Trump did that because they viewed it as their victory in Syria, not Erdogan's, and Trump gave it to Erdogan. And then Trump, of course, had Erdogan in September to the White House and was backslapping with him and signed a nuclear deal with him and said, this guy, I just want everyone to understand how much I love this guy and how great he is. And he's really been my good friend in the Middle East, and I have his back. And that goes back to the first term. He was saying that about Erdogan in 2019. Same with Qatar. Qatar, like Tamim is Trump's guy. Trump flew to Asia, stopped in Qatar to get refuel. Tamim came out, got on the plane. They were sitting there hugging each other and backslapping, same thing. So when he's sitting there saying that Qatar and Turkey are our mortal enemy and we have to fight them, he's really saying Trump. Like, it's very important to recognize that that's who he's talking about. Yeah. He's calling out Trump. In that same speech, that same guy also said, the world is never going to love us, so they should learn to fear us. He said that. So to your point, I put this in the brief this week. Here is this guy. This is the other guy. So in order to get rid of Netanyahu in 2021, two people had to team up. The guy we just saw, Naftali Bennett, he was one of them. And the other guy was Yair Lapid. This is Yair Lapid. Naftali Bennett is a politician. Yair Lapid is a former news anchor turned politician. They're both centrists, right? Naftali Bennett is like center right. Yair Lapid, this guy is center left. Okay. And so the way they ran on a platform and they said, we're going to be co-prime ministers. It'll be 12 months of Yair Lapid, 12 months of Naftali Bennett, 12 months of Yair Lapid, and so on and so forth. All right. And so then halfway through Naftali Bennett's term, that's when Netanyahu went and made the deal with the devil with the really, really crazy religious people, the people who were like hardcore Jewish supremacists, brought them into the mix. And that's how he got rid of Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett. Here's Yair Lapid a few days ago, prior to this war starting, on a war with Iran.
I want to use this opportunity to send a clear message to our enemies. No matter who is in government in Israel, we will always know how to defend ourselves. We will always strike at those who seek to harm us. I say especially to the Iranian regime, we will never allow you to build up a missile threat against our people again. Your terror proxies will never be given a moment's peace, and you will never, never be allowed nuclear weapons. My position is clear. It is time to strike at the foundations of the regime. The people of Israel deserve to live in safety. The people of Iran deserve freedom and a better life. The Middle East deserves a future of peace and prosperity. Israel will stand united. There will be no opposition coalition during war with Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu and I will put aside our differences for the defense of our country, for the defense of our people. All of Israel will unite behind our soldiers and pilots.
So the significance is that this guy is the leader of what's called the opposition. He's the opposition leader in the Knesset, meaning there's two sides to every government in Europe and in Israel, which is there's the leader of the government in power, which is the prime minister, and then there's the leader of everyone who's not part of the coalition. That's called the opposition, and they elect their own leader. That's this guy. So this guy is literally the political leader who stands in opposition to Netanyahu officially in Israel. And he's saying right here, if you go to war with Iran, I will put aside all differences that we have. We will no longer criticize you. We won't scrutinize you. We won't dig into all of the corruption that you're involved in right now, that we're doing right now. And we will stand with you until that war is over. He's giving Netanyahu every incentive to start a war with Iran. Okay. Yeah. It's also worth noting that this guy is like considered on the quote unquote left. Netanyahu's on the quote unquote right. And he's asking for war. I've said it many times. I've looked. I can't find a political faction anywhere across the spectrum in Israel that doesn't want a war with Iran. It's every single faction wants a war with Iran. Some of them are like, we don't want war with Gaza. We don't want war with Palestine. We'll sign a two-state solution. But all of them want war with Iran. Every single one.
Yeah.
So again, like this kind of puts like another little tick in the column of why Trump maybe would do this, is that he's kind of leaning into that, and he's kind of giving them a reason to all get on the rug together. They're all getting on the rug together, right?
That perfectly sets up. Yeah, I want to dig more into that reading. And again, that's just one reading, right? But the funny thing is, there will be signs of whether or not we're right about that. When you're pointing out some of the thesis testers here of escalations and what those escalations would look like, that's the benefit of having the neocon Zionist playbook laid out that you've spent a lot of time looking into. We know what it is, right? So we know what it would look like coming to fruition. And certainly this weekend looks like the beginnings of that. But Midnight Hammer looked like the beginnings of it. And Venezuela, not in Israel, but Venezuela looked like the beginnings of a lot of neocon wet dreams in the Western Hemisphere. So there will be markers here, and I want to get deeper into that. I do want to take one more break to thank our sponsors. By the way, thank you to Rumble for featuring us. We are featured right now. So Ghost, I would like you to make sure your opinions are sanitized. I want them to be approved by everybody in Iran and Israel that are watching right now.
Are we live in Israel right now?
We could be. We could be live in Israel and Iran at the same time, and I need you to strike a balance between those 2 points of view. So, our other sponsors right now, one of the biggies is ourselves, and I don't know if this counts as official besmirchery. That is what's the word? I don't know if I can sue over this. I did technically give my permission, but I'll let you guys be the judge.
Legend says, on St. Patrick's Day, a beard without oil is just a chin with ambition. But a beard with soft disclosure beard oil, that's true treasure. Spiced vanilla, naked, smooth as a leprechaun's getaway plan. Soft enough to impress your barber, bold enough to confuse a baby goat. And this boar bristle brush tames your beard like it holds the crown coin. Every bottle is American made, which means when you buy Soft Disclosure, you're supporting 6 American small businesses. That's not luck, that's capitalism with cheekbones. And while you're at it, try our mint green deodorant, because even legends need fresh pits. Soft Disclosure, go for gold. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code TINYBRIGHT for 15% off.
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. Promo code does not apply to bundle discounts.
Our old friend Green Star back with a pretty great one. Softdisclosure.com, promo code TinyBright. Ghost is also a Celtic. He of Celtic origin. So that's extremely racist. But as I have long said, it is perhaps justified because my point of agreement with the blacks is that Irish people are the black people of white people.
True.
I will confidently say that, and nobody knows exactly what I mean, but everybody knows I'm right. And as an Irish person, I can say that. I'm allowed to say that.
Well,
That's how it works.
Blazing Saddles clarified that like 50 years ago. So
yeah, it's true. But we got to do that on Story Hour.
Yeah, you do.
I can't believe we have not yet. So Irish people are the black people of white people, and that means that ad is now racist. And I did say before I played that ad that I wondered aloud, can I sue John for that? And it turns out, I don't know who I was kidding. Suing John Harold is one of the easiest things you can do. So they're a dime a dozen.
Very true. Very true.
Just get in line while the getting's good. And I will be spinning up my own. We're also brought to you by ourselves again. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/events to grab tickets to Nashville. Oh, I think we have our Rumble sponsor which I totally messed up because that's what I do. And that Rumble sponsor is the Kids Guide. All right, parents, real talk for a second. America's about to hit a huge milestone. We're coming up on America's 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-government the world has ever seen. This is the perfect moment. This is the perfect moment to help your kids understand why this country matters. Not just fireworks and hot dogs, but the story behind it all. There's a free guide called The Kids Guide to America's 250th. It's honestly a great way to introduce kids to how America began, who the founding fathers were, what they risked, and why the ideas fought for still matter today. The guide sends kids back to the moment that when brave men signed the Declaration of Independence, knowing full well they were risking their lives for freedom. It breaks down all in the way kids can actually understand and enjoy without watering it down or turning it into boring schoolwork. If you care about raising kids who know where the country came from and why it's worth preserving, this is something you'll want to grab. And the best part is it's completely free with the special offer. You need to pay $2 shipping and handling. Just head to freeusabirthday.com and the Kids Guide to America's 250th birthday for your kids today. America's story matters. Make sure the next generation knows it. So thank you to them. And again, our other sponsor is ourselves. Ghost and I will be in Nashville spreading hate and racism and probably some other based good things as well. April 9th through the 12th. Looking forward to seeing you guys there. We got a stacked lineup of other ne'er-do-wells. Badlandsmedia.tv/events. Grab your tickets. I don't know if VIP is sold out. I think it might be. But general admission for the full weekend is still available, so we're looking forward to that. Okay. Now that that is out of the way. You just mentioned getting on the rug. Getting on rugs is something of a specialty of ours in the truth community. We love a good rug. Now, we've learned to be wary of rugs, but we just can't quit them. And some of us, John's on an election rug. He loves his election rugs. Gets on those all the time. G-Money doesn't think he's on a rug, but he gets on, and the Fed rugs as frequently as he can. Is this the moment when the banks come crashing down? And you just mentioned before the break there that there's a way of reading this where not just the Israelis, but let's leave even the specifics out of it, where the warmongers, the people who want a forever war in the Middle East, they want a major regional war with Iran. They're on a rug right now. It remains to be seen whether whether that rug's going to get pulled or not. But that's kind of that when I said I was going to narratively carpet bomb everybody, that's what I was referring to. The whole implication of me saying, I think we're looking at dueling color revolutions again and dueling regime change ops again, just a much bigger, admittedly, more kinetic version of that might have a lot more risk to it. It feels to me like this could bump up against some of those Israel for last comms from the Q drops. It could start to get us there anyway. In terms of, I've been using the term Kobayashi Maru, impossible task from Star Trek, for a couple of years now. I first deployed that in an article called The Impossible Task on the back of October 7th in 2023. And my argument then was that the most difficult narrative and actual powder keg for Donald Trump to untangle was going to be the Middle East, Israel, Iran. And I think that's true, but that's my weird white pill reading of this, is to say in the early going, within 48 hours, within 36 hours, we've got what looks like the neocons getting everything they wanted, and a lot of the people you've been following looks like they're getting anything they wanted. But 36 hours in, are we already starting to see some of them realize that they might be on a different rug, or realize they might be on a rug to begin with?
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting. And yeah, and I think, talking about this from the Sovereign Alliance perspective, that probably makes sense to shift to that.
Yeah.
That discussion.
Larger global implications of this move.
Yeah. So I think staying in the region to begin probably makes the most sense. Let's see. John had I just saw the right as we were going live. John tagged us in this post. So this is Avi Mayer. I don't know who that is. He's former editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Post and now runs a Substack called the Jerusalem Journal. But he says, breaking: Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman convinced President Trump to launch a military campaign aimed at toppling the Iranian regime, Saudi royal official says. And he's reporting it from In12, which is News Channel 12 in Israel. And then he goes on to expand from there. Saudi official, quote, Trump hesitated at first and planned to leave Israel to enter a significant war on its own, having the U.S. participate in a limited strike on nuclear facilities. He also intended to leave U.S. forces as a deterrent and a means of forcing a new nuclear deal, end quote. Saudi official, quote, MBS convinced Trump that temporary solutions don't work and we must destroy Iran's nuclear, missile, and military capabilities to topple this regime, which has been trying to drag the region toward escalation as a matter of policy. We must not give the current regime in Iran a chance to regain its strength. That is also what we are telling Trump right now, because he may want to return to talks and end the war, which critics consider a hasty and dangerous move. The fear is that Trump will make a mistake and give the Iranians a chance to recover. The danger must be totally uprooted before it spreads throughout the region once again. So it's really important to put this reporting in context, because what I've been tracking for quite some time now is that there is a really ever since this Iran thing went hot like 2 months ago, is that there's a really serious like psyop against MBS in Israeli media, where they are basically, they were trying to paint him as like a friend, because they were like, hey, let's normalize relations with between Israel and Saudi Arabia. As soon as that happens, that signals to the rest of the Middle East that they need to get on board, and that Iran is like the odd man out. And then MBS and the Saudis were just absolutely insistent that it had to be contingent on normalizing with Palestine, the two-state solution, restoring the borders to 1967, etc. And then that was when Israel really soured on him. So they've been pushing this new rhetoric, this new narrative against him, saying that he is actually a radical jihadist. He's actually a radical terrorist. He's actually the number one funder of like terrorism aside from Iran, like all this stuff. They've been just slinging spaghetti at the wall to see what they can get to stick against MBS, but slandering him in every possible way. This is, in my opinion, an extension of that campaign to slander him. I could be wrong for a number of reasons, though. This is why I think that. Number one, it totally tracks with the idea that they're trying to besmirch him. Saudi and the UAE are currently in like a weird fight, which could be kayfabe, it could be contrived, where Saudi Arabia is developing a new alliance with like Turkey, Pakistan, some other Middle Eastern countries, while the UAE is like cultivating their alliance between Israel, India, certain countries in Africa, and that there's going to be this big fight between those two factions, with Saudi Arabia on one side, the UAE on the other. Qatar is part of the Saudi contingent in this like little fight, however real it may be. The third thing is that the Saudis are notoriously like very private. They play everything very close to the chest. They keep things in house. They don't like to run around, talking, like running their mouths behind closed doors. The last person they're going to go talk to about this is going to be like an Israeli official, like an Israeli media official. You're not going to be like, hey, Israeli media, guess what we're talking about with Donald Trump? Donald Trump's a fucking idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. We're worried that he's going to do something stupid, like let Iran have nuclear weapons. You better go blow him up. Like we told Trump to go blow him up. No.
Well, I don't know. Well, if they're two unnamed sources, those guys are pretty trustworthy. As long as it's the two unnamed source guys close to the situation, they're always close to the situation. And like those guys never tell anybody, what's going on.
Yeah.
They're always just unnamed in the room, and so as long as it was them.
I will remind everybody, if we can go back in time for a minute to late October 2024, 2 weeks before the election, Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham were out there saying, now's the time to strike Iran. We should take out all the oil fields in southern Iran because that would really cripple the Ayatollah's ability to make money and to keep his coffers flush with cash. Let's attack the oil fields in Iran. And it was like a foregone conclusion that we were going to do this 2 weeks before the election, right? And the reason that would have been a terrible idea is because those oil fields were supplying China and India with oil. And if you blew up those oil fields, China and India all of a sudden are going to want to come fight you. So, yeah, that would have been a really stupid idea. Who showed up in the 11th hour to protect Iran and like not make it happen? Saudi, because all of a sudden we got this deployment on October 22nd. We had an Iranian rear admiral show up in the news and say, yeah, we just negotiated with Saudi. We're going to do, for the first time ever, we're going to do a joint military operation because we've hated Saudi since 1979. We've been in this terrible ideological conflict with them since 1979. We're going to do our first joint military operation or exercise in the Persian Gulf. And then 2 days later, the Saudis came out and said, oh, yeah, we actually already did the joint military operation. Like our boats were sailing around, playing with one another all day. And we're going to do the same thing all over again in the Red Sea here pretty soon. Just wait and see. So, like, did the exercise actually happen? I doubt it, but they certainly said it happened. And, like, that was them flexing at the last minute.
That's enough for
like,
me, Ghost.
Yeah, that was them flexing and being like, hey, you better not come blow anything up in Iran 2 weeks before Donald Trump gets elected president and leave him with the burning dumpster fire to deal with. That was Saudi
do it himself.
To protect Iran from whoever, Netanyahu, basically. So for all those reasons, I don't believe that bullshit. Oh yeah, and last thing I wanted to show you, I went to that guy's website. This is his Jerusalem Journal Substack, and look at what his most recent article is. Qatar's global war on Israel. Well, I just finished explaining to you that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are like this right now. Very, very tight. And Trump and Qatar are also like this right now. Very, very tight.
Trump and Maduro are also very, very tight, to go back to Operation Absolute Resolve, which was a little tell there.
Yeah. So it's like, on one hand, the Saudis are like encouraging Trump like to go to war with Iran and like talking behind Qatar's back. But on the other side, like none of this makes any sense. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like Israel is currently engaged in a narrative war against Qatar and MBS. This has been consistent. And all of a sudden they're letting off the gas on MBS because they want to restart this narrative that MBS is the one encouraging the war. The reason is they're trying to slander MBS. They're trying to turn the Muslim world against MBS and be like, he's a traitor. Don't trust him. You should cast him out from your circles. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and it seems too, we've talked for a few years about the idea that, we're kind of transitioning into the Sovereign Alliance topic, as we usually do. And certainly a big keystone in the Sovereign Alliance is Saudi Arabia. So, and one of the major kind of things you've talked about for a long time is, why is Saudi Arabia such a big player? It's not just, they're an important country, they're an important member of the Sovereign Alliance. It's in the context of the Muslim, the Kingdom of Islam, essentially. They literally are called the Kingdom, but they hold that place, and they could hold that place again when it comes to the idea of forming new and also old regions of responsibility. Part of when we go back to the Venezuela topic, I think you and I did a show around the Venezuela stuff. We did a show in January on the narrative. And I had written an article at that time called Sovereign Disentanglement. And part of that was the idea of, Donald Trump kind of thrusting Pax Americana back into the zeitgeist and this whole Western Pax Americana macro region of responsibility. And we've talked about Russia and China and the US as the trinity of the Sovereign Alliance. But if there's a fourth that's kind of equal in importance, I would say it is Saudi Arabia. And that's because the Middle East has been this hot zone for centuries, not just decades. And for centuries, you could argue that a lot of the warring in the region has been engineered by powers within and without, right? So to your point about subverting, why would you want to subvert Saudi Arabia besides like, to achieve your political or geopolitical ends? You'd want to subvert the new narrative standing that Saudi Arabia has attained in the region, right? It's not just about destabilizing or trying to get, you're absolutely right that it's like the Saudis aren't going to buy into any of this shit, but that's not what it's for, right? It's to try to get Iran pissed at Saudi Arabia. It's to try to get these other players in the kingdom pissed at Saudi Arabia because they're the ones who could act as that mediator. And we have seen them do that. We saw them do that on the back of, and again, all this could be narrative, but it doesn't really matter. Abstract power projection is power projection. The whole reason I created this show, the whole reason I specialize in narrative warfare is not just because that's what I'm good at, but it's because it's a form of power projection. And more people in the info war are starting to understand that. In the wake of Midnight Hammer in Iran, to your point, when Israel was still trying to escalate on the back of it, it wasn't just Donald Trump telling them to stand down. It was Saudi Arabia threatening them to stand down in the region, right? So that was a pretty big move at the time, given the recent history of Saudi Arabia and Iran. And you had theorized basically since 2023, it's going to be interesting to see if the Saudis come to the defense of the Iranians at any point over the next few years. And we've definitely seen them doing that on a rhetorical level, on a narrative level. So it makes sense that you try to destabilize that narrative, right? You try to get them fighting each other or not trusting each other. And, I think the good news is we would both probably agree the real players here understand the narrative games that are being played. And, if you want any proof of that, it's not direct proof, but it's compelling to me. Speaking of sovereign alliance, both Russia and China are taking every chance they can in recent weeks to tell you that they literally ignore Donald Trump's public communications because they have back channels.
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny, We've been talking about this as a rerun of JFK and Nikita Khrushchev, right? JFK and Nikita Khrushchev weren't talking about their back channels. They were secret. They're secret back channels. That's what a back channel is, right? A huge tell of the sovereign alliance being real and all being on the same page as each other is that they're telling reporters openly, we literally ignore everything each other says to you because you are all liars, and we talk to each other on the regular all the time. And if you don't think the Saudis are in those conversations, then you haven't been paying attention. And, you've been pointing this out on some of your shows. It's kind of interesting timing that we've had a lot of the globalist media spinning up Khashoggi and anti-Saudi narratives in the last couple of weeks leading into this operation too.
Yeah, and like Lindsey Graham was out there saying, I really need to reconsider everything I thought I knew about Saudi Arabia. Like, these guys are actually scumbags. Because remember, like, the narrative was a month ago, 2 months ago, that the Saudis were the ones who talked Trump out of attacking Iran, right? And so then Lindsey Graham came out and said, what? If that's the case, then MBS, like, he's actually not our friend, and maybe we should cut off diplomacy with them. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that, like, again, like, these people are just, these are like very subversive, slippery little fish. And, if you look at here's just like a random example. This is one that I bookmarked because I think it's so funny. And I was just like going through my bookmarks and saw it. But this one, and I thought I was sharing my screen, but I'm not. This is from 3 years ago, but it's just relevant. Lavrov, during a press conference, talking about his meeting with the Arab League. This is from January 2023. And he said, the West asked all the Arab ambassadors not to pose for a photo with me. This was not a joke. But I was very flattered by the fact that after my presentation, all of them came up to me and each asked to pose in the photo with me. And this was after they refused to join in on the sanctions that the Biden administration put on Russia. The Arabs were all like, yeah, we're not going to do that. So, these are like, I know originally when we scheduled this show together, we were talking about like honor culture, like men keeping their word to one another and not letting like these little like duplicitous scumbags like Lindsey Graham and pretty much like pretty much like every person in American politics who are not at all respected anywhere around the world by anybody because they talk out of both sides of their mouth. This is how men actually engage with one another around the world. Is like they say what they mean what they say. They're not afraid to speak their mind. They're not afraid to say the unpopular thing when it's necessary. And then when they're told to do something by people who are far more powerful than they are in a number of ways, they basically give those people the middle finger and then walk up and do the exact thing they were told not to do. That's what being a man of honor, I think, is. The Taliban showed that they're far more honorable than anybody in our government when they hunted down all of those ISIS-K guys who blew up the Abbey Gate on behalf of Donald Trump and the people who were killed at the Abbey Gate. It's like we have so many examples of this, of people from the Middle East who just have way more honor than the average politician in America. And it's a shame. It's a shame that we have to settle for such a low bar, but like, that's where we are.
Yeah. And your point about the honor culture, it ironically, it jives perfectly with the back channels communications, that the public communications about there being back channels. And I love that they're saying that because, again, Khrushchev and Kennedy were not saying that publicly. The fact that Lavrov is one of the guys who often talks about back channels. Lavrov talks about it, Trump talks about it, and Xi talks about it. But the reason, again, that's notable is because they're telling the media, like, they don't have to tell each other through the media that we have back channels, Lavrov doesn't have to get up there and say, hey, Donnie, anything I say right now, I'm just kayfabing, like, remember, we have back channels. Donald Trump knows they have back channels because Donald Trump is in the back channels, right? So who are the back channel comms for? I don't even think they're for us. I know a lot of people think like they're trying to give us the comms. Honestly, they don't need to give us the comms. We're picking up on the comms, and that's what we're trying to do.
Agreed.
But I don't think they need to tell us the comms, right? The back channels exist or they don't exist. They're effective or they're not effective. So why are they talking about the back channels? It's more to the point Ghost is making. They are telling the media, everything we tell you is completely meaningless. Every headline, everything I'm about to tell you, I recognize you, I being Sergei Lavrov, Dmitry Medvedev, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, Xi Jinping, Mohammed bin Salman. Pick your sovereign, bro. Anything I'm going to tell you is bullshit. So all the alchemy, all the narrative alchemy that you're going to do on the back of this conversation to try to foment the war between the sovereign alliance is not going to happen. And that's what I think those guys are actually doing when they're mentioning their back channels. They're telling the reporter to their face, you are a court jester. I will dance for you and give you some headlines, and I'm going to make them as funny and as bombastic as possible. But just know that when you go crawling back to your masters in the globalist protectorate and the warmongers, none of this is actually going to escalate anything. So, it's funny. Honor is unspoken, right? That's one of those things about honor culture. It's unspoken. You just do. You are. Chivalry is not spoken. It's just acted. And I think that's why, from the sword dance that a lot of people in this audience are familiar with, to Donald Trump's Middle Eastern world tour, Trump could have gone and done a bunch of photo ops over in Saudi Arabia. I think it was the UAE and Qatar, right? Early in 2025. Those three stops, he didn't even have to give any speeches. He did give speeches, but the symbolism alone was enough. Like, he went there for a reason. Just like back in 2017, he did his world tour and he did his Saudi sword dance for a reason. Because the people who understand what these things mean in honor culture understand what they mean. And I think that goes both ways. I think that goes to the other men of honor. And I think they're also talking to their enemies, you know, pretty much all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. I think that that they are communicating with each other far more than they're communicating with the public, especially when you're talking about these like Eastern leaders. Like like these are monarchies, guys. They don't need the consensus of their public in order to do things. Like
they don't need
can
public
do whatever
mandate.
the fuck they want. Like that's how a monarchy works. Benevolent monarchy is how Tom Barrack describes them, and I think he's right. But yeah, and you know, these kind of operations that like if this whole thing is an op, and I'm sure it probably is, you know, a bigger plan, it only works if all the players involved are on the same team, right? Except for maybe one or two, like whoever they're running the op against, right? They want us to think it's Iran. I'm not convinced at all it is Iran, but we'll find out. I would kind of point more towards the people who are like running their mouth the most, the people who are like being the scrappy little like dog with like, you know, like little dog syndrome. They tend to be, I think, the ones who are being targeted here. That would be Israel. I think they're the ones who are getting the op run against them personally. But like go back to what that guy Naftali Bennett was saying, where he was like, Turkey and Qatar are trying to turn Saudi Arabia against us. I don't think Turkey's trying to turn Saudi against anybody. Like, I don't think Turkey's doing anything in Saudi Arabia. If anything, it's Saudi Arabia who's bringing Turkey into the fold. Who did Trump go and do the first thing with, the sword dance, at the beginning of his first presidency? Yeah. Saudi Arabia was the first one brought into the whole partnership, right? The whole sovereign alliance. So if anything, they went out and they
first stop. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like they went out and they collected Qatar and Turkey along the way, not the other way around. That's where I think that guy is very confused, and he might know better, but he's just saying it, whatever. So I think there's that to it. Now, as far as, you know, optics and narrative and stuff, because that is certainly something that all of these leaders are going to be dealing with in their country, in their home countries, because that does matter to a certain extent. That's different from public mandate. That's like, if your people think that you're betraying them, or, you know, that sort of things can get very, very dicey very quickly, especially in places that are already like on edge and already trending in that direction. Right. That's where I think things do get really dicey and a little sketchy for like the whole situation. I mean, there's so many like videos floating around of like cities getting bombed right now. How much is any of that real? We don't know. Like, again, we don't know. Like, that's stuff where that's like, again, these are things where I have always said I focus way more on the response of public figures than the actuals of what's happening, like the actuals of a story, because I can't verify whether the actuals are real, but I can verify whether these people are saying this stuff and how they're engaging with the narrative and how they're using it to advance a certain agenda. And that tells me what their motives are over a long enough period of time.
And that's exactly why I know I've brought him up like 4 times tonight, but John Bolton as one example. It's exactly to the point you just made. It is, I'm not saying I know for sure what it signals, but it absolutely signals something that John Bolton, the king of regime change and destabilization ops, is not happy with how chaotic Donald Trump is being over in Iran. And to me, that signals that John Bolton, A, doesn't know what Donald Trump is doing there, or B, does know what Donald Trump is doing there and doesn't like it. And both of those things are better reads than C, he knows what Trump is doing and he loves it. You know, and that's kind of a good indicator. I want to give a shout out before we get more. I want to go back to Sovereign Alliance, but I want to give a shout out to, I think it was Beth in the chat, who sent this New York Times headline over that was published tonight, just before showtime. I did not see this. I promise you guys that my talking points about Venezuela, well, actually, I have proof of that because I put them out on Saturday. Look at what Beth sent over. from the New York Times, published at 8:21 p.m. tonight. Trump says war could last weeks and offers contradictory visions of the new regime. But let's look at this section here. He offered a very different model of what the transition of power in Iran might look like, referring repeatedly to his experience in Venezuela after he ordered a Delta Force team to seize Mr. Maduro. What we did in Venezuela, I think, is the perfect scenario, Trump said. His answer implied that what worked in Venezuela would work in Iran, a nation with about 3 times the population and military and clerical leadership that has ruled with increasing repression since the 1979 revolution. Over the past several weeks, Mr. Trump has repeatedly brought up Venezuela as the model of a successful operation and hoped to replicate aspects of it in Iran, identifying leadership that would be more cooperative and friendly to the United States. But he's been told by his advisors that the vast differences in cultures and history made it virtually impossible, kind of like a Kobayashi Maru, to apply the strategy used in Venezuela, in which the existing government was kept in place after it agreed to take instructions from Washington and try to replicate it in Tehran. Nonetheless, Mr. Trump appears enamored of using a Venezuela-like model in Iran. Everybody's kept their job except for 2 people, Mr. Trump said of the outcome in Venezuela. He was vague on the question of who should be at the top ruling position in Iran after the Ayatollah's death, or even who should decide. At first, when asked whom he wanted to lead Iran, he said, "I have 3 very good choices," he added. "I won't be revealing them now. Let's get the job done first." But then he described a scenario in which the Iranian people would overthrow the existing government. That's going to be up to them whether or not they do, Mr. Trump said. They've been talking about it for years, so now they'll obviously have an opportunity. What is he talking about? The color revolution that they've been planning over in Iran. That would, of course, be the opposite of the Venezuela model that he had said minutes earlier he wanted to replicate. So, I don't know, Ghost, but I'm just saying, Donald Trump might as well have word for word basically said, we're doing what we did in Venezuela, and what we did in Venezuela was a fake regime change that convinced everybody who needs to be convinced that it was a real regime change.
Yep.
And we did it to stop a real regime change that is actually a color revolution. But if they want to try the real regime change, they can be my guest. So
yeah.
That is my reading. And granted, like, I am very biased because that codes exactly onto what I thought was going on yesterday. But to me, I also think it's interesting that the New York Times acknowledges that the cultural and historical complications of doing the Iran narrative, or the discombobulator, the Venezuela discombobulator in Iran is nearly impossible. And that's why when I put my take out yesterday, and just to prove to people that I did, just gonna take on my victory lap. I don't give a shit here.
Dude, it's your show.
Ghost, like, I'm one for victory laps as well.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going on here, but Kobayashi Maru.
Damn.
Who's that?
A short post.
Yeah. Donald Trump's Kobayashi Maru is on again. I'm not going to read this whole thing. But I did say the pattern here matches 2 earlier operations we've already tracked. The same template appeared in Venezuela earlier this year during Operation Absolute Resolve, which media narratives sold as Trump finally executing globalist regime change plan against Maduro. Instead, the operation removed the figurehead, installed a stabilizing second-in-command who preserved national sovereignty while quickly moving to assist Trump and U.S. elements in purging the cartel and external networks, and left said globalist machine with nothing but an empty narrative. Watch the same cycle play out now. The Iran story escalates fast in the first hours, but based on the established pattern of Trump's second term, it will de-escalate just as quickly in the days ahead. Back channels active, Iranian officials confirming leadership intact, signals of readiness to negotiate once the immediate phase ends. If I'm right, the most important tell will come when neocons, warmongers, hawks, and globalist so-called allies who first cheer Trump's escalatory moves pivot sharply to attacking Trump for lack of follow through, for refusing endless occupation or total war. And what I also said in that post was the first people, if I'm right, to codify Donald Trump's narrative would be the Iranians, who then did. And again, yes, I'm taking a victory lap and I don't give a fuck. But the reason I'm doing that is to demonstrate that if you look at the narrative patterns and what Ghost just said, which is the reactions to Donald Trump's narratives by all the players, you can form templates out of that and then apply those templates. I just love the fact that the New York Times added, this is basically an impossible task with Iran. And I think Captain T. Kirk J. Trump is probably the only one out there that could navigate a narrative like that. But to your earlier points in the show, there may be permanent damages done to the narrative with this one. I just don't know if there's a clean way through this story.
Yeah, and there probably isn't, and that's fair. That's fine. A few things. They're lying about a couple of different things. When they say that an increasingly repressive regime, I just showed you how in the past 13 years, we've gone from having mullah as the president to a heart surgeon 2 years ago. That was ostensibly elected by the Iranian people and allowed to take office by the IRGC. So obviously it's not increasingly repressive. It's, if anything, it's getting better. There's that. The funny part about Trump saying a color revolution or whatever, the people, a populist uprising.
Yeah, the people can take it back if they want.
If they want. But you will recall that Trump and Putin and them definitely ran an op against the Mossad network. We didn't even talk about that, but I mean, you and I have talked about it, and I've talked about it with everybody else on every other show I've been on. Is that the network that Mossad spent generations putting in place in preparation for this like regime change operation was totally snuffed out. And the reason that we didn't do, Trump even said it, he goes, I would have done this earlier, man, but we had the carrier like down in Venezuela. Sorry, my bad. Really needed it down there though to get Maduro. And so when that whole thing hit its apex and Trump was putting out there, go, take back your country, take back what's yours. That was January 10th, I think. Yeah. All of the Atlantic Council, like think tank analysts were coming out and saying, wait a minute, we don't have any assets in the area. Like we can't do anything to back them. There is no help on the way. Why is Trump telling them there's help on the way? Don't do it. Don't go yet. Yeah. And then the Iranian leadership cut off the internet. And then so Elon stepped in the same day that Trump said, go, take back your country. Elon said, I'm giving free Starlink to everyone in the country. So he gave free Starlink to everybody. And then later, Larijani, who's the guy who implemented Iranian devolution, he's the one who was running the whole like devolution operation in Persia. He came out and said, yeah, the Russians helped us hack the Starlink. So we actually used Starlink to locate all the Mossad operatives, and we arrested all of them. So now we shut down the entire network. It's all shut down. It's done. That's why they were all freaking the fuck out in January. They were like, our network is shut down. We can't do a color revolution anymore. We've blown our load. Like that. It was a one-time thing, and now it's gone. And so now Trump saying, go, like, if you want to do it, do it.
Yeah.
They're not going to do it because there's nobody there to do it.
And, it also makes me think he's taunting them. And he's also, to use the Chris Paul drafting analogy, Trump is riding their regime change op, right? That's like, these are dueling regime changes, dueling color revolutions. And part of what I think is going on here is, this community, the info war, a lot of people here who followed the drops and everything, you're aware of the concept of sleeper cells, right? And a lot of us talk about that from the perspective of like the Jason Bournes of the world, Wetworks, like these, secret groups of kinetic operatives. But the most common type of real sleeper cell that's active in the global battle space are these NGO-funded, the protest industrial complex, right? We've got it in the US. We've got it in Minnesota, has been a big deal throughout 2025 and 2026. We've got it everywhere. The George Floyd, the BLM stuff. And now, what's going on in the wake of Donald Trump killing the Ayatollah and affecting regime change and kicking off the forever war in Iran? Sleeper cells activate worldwide for the protest industrial complex, right?
Yeah.
What I think is going on is Trump is not just causing the enemy to use their ammunition. Trump is firing the enemy's ammunition. These sleeper cells, the way they work is usually not that they get a phone call and they say like go orders. They know the conditions for the go orders. That's how a sleeper cell activates, right? A sleeper cell typically activates based on conditions. And if they are told the conditions for activation are color revolutions, Jay Drake is saying Chris Paul called the sleeper cell thing last night. Well, if that's what he was saying, was he talking about the protesters? I didn't watch the show last night, but
yeah.
I mean, that's what's going on.
I was pretty much dead all day yesterday from the man flu. So
exactly, it's the dueling color revolution thing that he's been talking about, the drafting idea, and again, Trump gets to say like, you're getting what you wanted. Look, we've got the war with Iran, and everybody on that side of things that thinks this is what they were going to get, this is what they were promised, they activate. And they can't do it again. You can't put the genie back in the bottle there. And, I think there's a lot of that going on. It's interesting that Trump put a 4-week timeline on this one. I don't believe him with his timelines ever, for better or worse. But, it does make me wonder if he is acknowledging this is a Kobayashi Maru. This is more complicated than Delcy Rodriguez, Nicolas Maduro, and figuring that shit out. And maybe to bring us back into the Sovereign Alliance, I think untangling narratively this Kobayashi Maru could be a great opportunity to bring Putin and Xi and Mohammed bin Salman into the central narrative in the fallout of this, right? And to your earlier point, the beginnings of them coming into the central narrative are probably going to be extremely tense. But you need that. I said that in my 2022 article, The Death of War. In order to be peacemakers, you need the threat of war. So if you've got all these guys circling a powder keg in the Middle East, what better way for all those different figures to bring their mandate onto the battlefield and then codify it together?
Yeah, no, that's very, very well said. Here I can. I don't know if did I ever show you like the map that I made of like the Middle East. I did this recently of like this new security architecture that they were putting together.
I'm not sure.
Here, let me just give me 1 second. Fill the dead air with something real quick, and I'll pull this up.
People. No, that's great, and it's encouraging. Like Power Hour last night was talking about these things too. It's like, that's what I said at the beginning of the show, the cognitive ciphers that we develop, it doesn't just become, Israel for last now meant the opposite of what I've been telling you it meant for 10 years, which is what most people do. It's like, how do we apply the templates that we applied to Midnight Hammer and Absolute Resolve to Epic Fury? Turns out they fit. They're just, there's small differences there, but I think it's highly encouraging, actually.
Yeah. So, all right, I got it now. If you want to share my screen. Okay. So, what's really interesting for me, like I want to see how the new security architecture that MBS has created holds up. This is like a real stress test for that. Because one thing that I've been talking about for weeks now, and I've done this on a few different shows that I've been on, is like created this map to show people how if you want stability in the Middle East, you have to have a security architecture, just like Europe developed a security architecture after World War II. And that's led to like a long-standing peace in Europe. Now we can debate about what drove that and the forces behind it and all that, but you can't deny the result that Europe has been stable since World War II. There hasn't been like Germany fighting France, France fighting Spain, like that sort of thing happening. And that was happening for centuries and centuries and centuries before that. Getting that kind of stability in the Middle East is what's going to allow the Middle East become the next Europe, which is what MBS said is his actual goal, is he wants to make the Middle East the next Europe in terms of culture and prosperity, golden age, all that kind of stuff. So at the center of this entire new architecture is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia here in the center is the linchpin that holds together everything. They've gone out and they have established a security agreement with, first it was Pakistan. They signed that security agreement back in September, right after Qatar signed an agreement with the United States to get the Article 5 protection after they were bombed by Israel. Then more recently, Saudi went out and they signed an agreement with Turkey, a security agreement. And then not long after that, very recently, Turkey announced a security agreement with Egypt. Now, Turkey has always had security agreements in place with Pakistan going back a very long time. Pakistan is significant because it's the only Muslim country that has nuclear weapons. Turkey is significant because it's the only Muslim country in NATO. And Egypt is significant because it controls the Suez Canal, and that is where 35%, I think, of all like maritime trade or whatever goes through the Suez Canal, something crazy like that. So if you look at like the Middle East as like a fortress, right? These three countries kind of represent the three walls of that fortress to the outside, right? You have Pakistan here in the east against Asia. You have Turkey here in the west against Europe, and then you have Egypt here in the southwest against Africa, right? Notably, I always made the note that there really wasn't anything blocking between Russia and the Middle East, but that's also Russia, I think, has been such a strong ally to the Middle East for so long that they don't view them as an imminent threat. If you look at how does global trade move through the world between Asia and Europe, traditionally, Mumbai is one of the largest trade ports in the world, right here in India. Traditionally, you ship from Mumbai by going through the Gulf of Aden, up the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal to the Mediterranean. The new trade route that's being developed by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization via China, instead of going through the Red Sea, you come up here, you drop off at Bandar Abbas in Iran. You get on a railroad. You go across the railroad up here through Azerbaijan and up to Moscow. Now that cuts 25% to 30% off of your travel time, which means you save time and you save money. So that's becoming an increasingly more popular way to trade between Asia and Europe. The point is, both of these trade routes go through the Middle East, and that makes Iran obviously a very important part of this security architecture. They are not formally a part of anything yet. So the question now stands, does this thing survive whatever's happening right now with Iran?
Right.
Yeah. Because at the same time, you also have the last caveat is that you have the two most important militaries here are going to be the Iranian military, which is the fourth most powerful military in the world, and the Turkish military, which is the largest military in the Middle East. It's also the second largest military in NATO after the United States. It's a very big military. Turkey has parked a shitload of F-15s in Baku, which is one of the most critical stops in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's trade route. They also have a very large F-16 base down here in Mogadishu in Somalia. So that's like the north point and the south point. So you can see they kind of have all points of access covered in the Middle East between Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt, with Saudi Arabia kind of being like the center of it all. It all kind of leads back to them, which is why I think they're the most important player of it all. So is this going to hold up? Is this going to last? Or are they all going to start fighting one another? Because right now, all these narratives that are out there that the media is throwing in every direction, they're trying to turn UAE against Saudi Arabia. They're trying to turn Saudi Arabia against whoever, like, against Sudan. They're trying to turn Turkey against Syria. They're trying to turn everyone against one another. Erdogan is out there holding press conferences, trying to hold the whole thing together, being like, everyone needs to chill out. Everyone needs to back off. Remember, it was MBS who summoned the entire Muslim world after the October 7th attack and told everyone to sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
I'm pretty convinced that the plan there before that was to piss off enough Muslims to get them to attack Israel, and then Israel would be justified in waging a war against them. But the point is that I think this security architecture is being challenged right now by this narrative, this conflict, not by Trump, but by everybody else who's trying to like take control.
They're ironically, they're trying to use the immediate reaction to it, which the immediate reaction to your intro points on the show tonight are, man, this looks a hell of a lot like the kickoff of the Forever War plan. Like this looks like the same step one, right? Just like the Maduro op looked like the same sort of step one for a globalist regime change plan there, right? What's step one of the globalist regime change in Venezuela? Get rid of Nicolas Maduro. What did Donald Trump do? He got rid of Maduro. It was all the steps that followed that were not the globalist plan, right? So I think that's what throws you for a loop. And when it comes to Iran, which is a much bigger geopolitical player, to your point, and way more entangled culturally, religiously, narratively, historically, just with geopolitics in the region, the step one that looks identical between Donald Trump's plan and the globalist plan is a really dramatic step. So, you know, this is that age old. A lot of the Q people who talk about the captain turned into the path of the torpedo before it could arm itself. It's dangerous to do that. That's why it can work, right? So I called it in June, July last year, narrative disarmament, and that's kind of what I see this as. You know, it's that drafting idea that Chris talks about, the dueling revolutions, the dueling color revolutions, but there's a little bit of that's like an interception as well. It's intercepting, like, here's the narrative, here's the regime change that's coming, and Trump grabs onto it and he intercepts it. He gets to it before it goes off. So we'll see. You know, like, we're very early in. We're 36 hours in to this deployment. But some things that I'm looking for, maybe you can kind of, as we wrap up here and get toward rants, maybe you can kind of think about what are the next things you're looking for in terms of development to see which direction this is going in over the coming days. For me, just as a simple thing, it would be, do we start to get a solidified new leadership in Iran? Does that new leadership have a lot in common with the old leadership? And does that new old leadership start talking to Donald Trump about deals? And finally, do the warmongers and globalists start criticizing Donald Trump for attempting to make these deals? Those are some of the things that I'll be looking at over the next week for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking for communist struggle sessions. I'm looking for
yeah.
What like, I'm not kidding. I'm like who is hosting the communist struggle sessions? Who is the target of the communist struggle sessions? You know, like, how are they trying to waterboard us and getting us to repeat like the sayings? So here, like, if you want to share my screen, here's the first one. Laura Loomer, shocker. You'll notice neither J.D. Vance or Tulsi Gabbard have tweeted in support of President Trump's strikes in Iran yet. They were together in D.C. while Marco Rubio was by POTUS's side at Mar-a-Lago during the strikes, telling. Interesting how MTG, who called the Trump administration a bunch of sick effing liars on X yesterday, is now appealing to Vance and Gabbard. I'm watching closely. I sure hope MTG isn't in communication with either of them, referring to Gabbard and Vance, given what she was simping for the Ayatollah yesterday. So here is Laura Loomer, who has been an absolute, like, she's a psychopath. I mean, the stuff she's saying on X for the past few months has been totally unhinged. Putting the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, like, under like the threatening her, basically, and being like, yeah, why haven't you tweeted yet, Gabbard? Like, are you not gonna join the communist struggle? Like, this is a communist struggle session right here. Laura Loomer is one of the most prolific communists on the internet these days. And this is right in line with exactly how she normally behaves. Doesn't surprise me at all. Like, the fact that she's attacking Tulsi Gabbard, of all people, is signal to me that like there's something else going on, and this is actually a little bit of a white pill for me that she's attacking Tulsi Gabbard because, it does contradict a lot of the other concerns that I have regarding Loomer and how happy she is about everything.
That's actually interesting, and this is just a little side addendum, but I don't know how I feel about JD Vance and the second coming after Donald Trump. I don't know where I'm at with that. I've been pretty open about that, but I have noted. I don't know if I did this on any shows. I think I commented on it in the brief. Which, by the way, guys, badlands.substack.com. It's all free. Myself, Ghost, and Ash run that over there. We get takes from us every day, and sometimes they're fucking awesome, and they nail everything that's going to happen the next day. And the other ones we just don't talk about. But what I did comment on like a week or two ago before the apocalypse here was I saw back-to-back headlines, like not just headlines, big editorials in Politico and The Atlantic talking about how globalist leaders don't know where JD Vance is at in terms of his loyalties inside the administration. And I thought it was notable. Like the articles written by globalist friendly rags, globalist owned media, they've been positioning JD as the heir apparent, but there's some concerns among some in MAGA about JD's background.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are valid rather.
Yep.
But it is also notable, and your Loomer tweet there just kind of resurfaced it for me. They are trying to foment strife between the Vance coalition and the Trump coalition. They're trying to draw a line of demarcation between those two things. The irony, you used the word reverse indicator a few times tonight. That's one of my favorite ways to track these things. The irony is that the thing that has made me most willing to give JD another once over in a good way is this stuff. Like, it doesn't mean he was always our boy, but it's kind of interesting that a lot of these people are like trying to get a wedge in between there, which the Politico piece in particular was talking about JD's role in the tech space and the tech push from Donald Trump. But they were saying, the tech sphere and the globalist sphere does not know where JD is at in terms of his loyalties to Trump's agenda. That leads me to believe they thought they would know. And hey, maybe that's in a better place now. You have any kind of last comments on this topic? Otherwise, I'll grab rants. I'm sure we'll be talking about this and writing about it all week.
Yeah, well, somebody sent this to me. This is just like I don't really know what to make of this, but this is a really weird. This is a weird one. Some outlet called JFeed, which is like it stands for Jewish News. An article from yesterday. I got a fellow by the name of Yair Kleinbaum. He sounds American. Carlson, Fuentes, and Owens must be jailed inside a World War II style internment camp. And this guy's being completely serious. I've read through this article. It's not very long, but he just says he basically accuses them of not just them, but people who question Israel, who criticize the Israeli agenda, who criticize Israeli foreign policy, that they're trying to incite the American military to rise up against the commander-in-chief and like ignore orders. And because of that, anyone doing that, he says we must act immediately. There's no other way. We should put them all in internment camps. And then once the war is won, we can release everybody. And it's like, I was trying to like look at this website and like, maybe this website's like farcical. Maybe it's not real. Maybe this is like all, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but like, I don't know, man. This is the kind of shit, like when you see this kind of stuff getting put out, this website looks to be complete. Like otherwise, this website seems to be like, earnest news website, like earnestly putting out this kind of shit. And it's just like
earnest propaganda. Yeah, that's why we have to invent terms so often, guys. Because how do you define this shit once you're this many layers deep?
Yeah, it's like I'm looking at this and I'm like, am I going to find out that like Nick Fuentes is the one who runs this website? Like this is a website that's run by someone who's trying to be ironic or something,
right?
So it's just
or make
like,
him
this is
into
the kind
a
of stuff
messianic figure.
But that's not the first time we've seen that kind of stuff. It's not the first. I mean, we're seeing the crackdown on free speech all come from that same camp to say that like you can't criticize Israel, you can't question it, you can't talk about it, you can't be anti-Semitic. It's all the same shit that they were doing with like the racism stuff and the misogynist stuff 10 years ago, except now it's coming from the Republicans on the right side, and it's the same crap, man. And people
telling you guys. That's why you gotta go back to the Chad meme, and when somebody calls you racist, you just say "yep," and sexist, and you go "yes, ma'am," and
yes, ma'am.
Watch what happens. Like nothing happens after that. That's
nothing
it.
Happens,
yeah, nothing happens. So just you do you and do whatever you want. One last button, tiny little button before I get to the rants. I thought this was a funny place to end. Operation Midnight Hammer, as Chris Paul pointed out at the time, bore an eerily identical plot structure, the mission I mean, to Top Gun Maverick, a Tom Cruise movie produced by Paramount Pictures, right? And, bunker buster, we had all that. You had to hit the target. Donald Trump gave you a series of press conferences in which he basically recited the plot of Top Gun Maverick and how impossible it was for those pilots to hit that nuclear silo the way they did. And now, what do we see today? Defiant Iranian foreign minister says regime change will be, quote, mission impossible. Now, guys, I know you may think this is silly, but Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol takes place, part of it, in Dubai. And the main set piece of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, starring Tom Cruise, produced by Paramount Pictures, who just took over Warner Brothers, as you may have seen, Trump allies. The set piece out of that is Tom Cruise scaling the Burj Khalifa. And you guys might have seen the Burj Khalifa all over the news over the weekend because there were drones flying towards it. And maybe it would get taken down. Anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the first story of Iran was all about Top Gun Maverick, and this one is Mission Impossible. Now, the Iranians didn't specify which Mission Impossible. I am taking creative liberties. I am saying they're talking about Ghost Protocol. So if you want to know what's going to happen, maybe we should rewatch Ghost Protocol, and that'll give us a few clues as to the plot to unfold.
Somebody should ask Arachi which Mission Impossible are we referring to, sir?
Yeah, there are many of them now. Far too many. All right, I will get to Boost, and right before I do, I believe we have one more sponsor from our friends at Rumble. And that sponsor is an old favorite, 1775 Coffee. Still haven't tried it? Now's your shot. The 1775 starter kit just dropped, only 1,000 units. You're getting the bold dark roast that hits hard, the smooth medium roast, and the vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy and laser focus with no crash. All single origin, small batch, toxin free and mold free. Plus you're also getting a gold spoon clip because freedom isn't scooped with plastic, a frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's opinions, and a black 1775 tumbler, $170 worth of coffee and gear, yours for $99. This is for the ones who've been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble, wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it is. Go to 1775coffee.com/studio. Grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. Thank you to 1775 Coffee. Thank you to you, Ghost, for joining me. You've got to do the brief, which is
I do.
These are the worst nights to put you on the narrative, but it's the only night the narrative's on. So,
is what it is. It's all right. All good,
man. Guys, go to badlands.substack.com. You can support us over there with a paid subscription, which supports myself, Ghost, and Ash. Or you can just watch everything and read everything for free. Ghost and Ash filled in on the Badlands Blitz, which is exclusive to the Substack every Saturday morning. Ghost filled in for me because I was in the apocalypse, did survive it. We have the Badlands Brief that comes out Monday through Friday. So it's good shit. Tend to have a lot of victory laps there. Let me grab these rants. Ghost, you can get out of here. I know you got stuff to do.
Well, I do want to give a shout out
one?
to. I saw Sod This just came in with a $200 rant, so I just wanted to give a shout out to Sod This. Appreciate the generosity from everybody. But yeah, man. Thanks for having me. So
yeah, good shit, man.
All right, I will see y'all later. You have a good night.
You too. All right, thanks to Ghost for joining. I think we I don't know if we figured anything out, but we're all a little bit less combobulated, or more combobulated, I think, which is good, because the last thing you want to be is discombobulated, which implies that being combobulated is in fact a desirable outcome. So I hope you guys are feeling combobulated. And if you're confused about what state of bobulation you currently exist in, then that's probably your answer. And otherwise, I'll get to you guys. I already thanked Tom Terrific, Jay Drake. By the way, Jonathan Drake, speaking of, will be my guest next weekend. The Narrative episode 61 will be a Jonathan Drake special. Probably going to talk about how much he simps for the government, how much he loves the military-industrial complex, how much he enjoys taxes, how hard he plans to vote, and a lot more. No, we're actually going to talk about mandate. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about Trump, the trustless. He doesn't know that, but I know that because that's an article I'm going to write at some point in time. We have Indie Boy just popping in while live to say we'll see you soon in Nashville. 38 days and a wake up for us. Gart fever is real. Plus, how can you not like the BB Soft Disclosure ad? It's a good ad. They thought I might be mad at that, but I was like, this is great. We'll unfortunately see Indie Boy in Nashville. Looking forward to seeing you guys there. This has been, I've lived in New England my entire life, the same general area, and that is the worst storm I have ever seen in my life. And I usually dismiss those things. Holy shit. Of course it hits different when you have a 14-month-old running around. But you know what? What's funny is he had like the best week of his life, staying in a Wampanoag shelter. Dances with Tigers was in the offing. Mrs. Bright was accosted by one Native American woman, but she handled herself well. Otherwise, the rest of them were great. 6'5" security guards were awesome. They took a picture with Baby Bright because he kept going up to the security desk all week that he was there and like wanting to get behind so that he could hang out with them. But yeah, it was good shit. We survived. My fuzzy boys survived. My pipes survived. My fence survived. That's why I got cedar fences with square posts, not round posts like the previous owners had in here. Sorry to like call you guys out, but what the fuck? Sandy foundations around here. So that shit all stayed up. It was good. It was terrible, but now it's good that we are alive. So Prophet60, thank you for sending that over. Got that earlier. Cindy Waters for $10. BB's already out here saying this is only the start for them going into Iran. Trump says the entire family's gone, waiting for DJT to say F you when asked to assist any further since regime is done. We're going to see this week. Going to be interesting. Yeah. I have a feeling that Trump just gave us an off-ramp from war. Not an on-ramp to it, but I tend to be in the minority on these things. Submission Yogi, Russia and China responding with press releases instead of kinetic defense seems like another sovereign alliance proof. Pretty few are selling it as World War III. Yeah, I don't see much in the narrative yet there in terms of like escalation. I don't think there's going to be any actual escalation either, but yeah, I don't see a whole lot there. I agree. Maybe this isn't the story that's going to bring them in. Baby Bright is stirring. We got him sneakers yesterday. We went to an arcade and he tested his sneakers out. And when I was a small child, I would pick the sneakers that would make me run the fastest. And I would have my mother time me in her mind with how fast each pair of sneakers would make me run. And I remember when I was a very small child, I knew that the Sonic the Hedgehog sneakers were probably the fastest ones. And she did say that I ran the fastest she'd ever seen a small child run when I put those on. So that's what Baby Bright. It's all about which sneakers you choose. Makes sense to me too. Not sure why everyone thinks we should back Israel no matter what. Even God turned away or hid his face from Israel over a dozen times in the Bible for being wicked. You said it, not me, but there's a lot of there's a lot of warmongers that have just been wearing MAGA clothing for a long time in and about this movement, aren't there? That we're all finding out together. And I just think Trump's going to rug them. I think they're all on a rug, as Ghost said earlier tonight. HL421, you guys need to check boosts more often. God bless you both. I do check the boosts. We each try to check the boosts for our own shows. That's the point of the boosts. We did get one come through tonight, and that is from Jay, who said Israel was created as the physical power projection of the British Empire. Israel's influence is British influence. Iran was set up to be Israel's dialectic. Seems to me that Trump is using Bibi to take out all the British assets in the region. Could be. I don't know. I mean, I think there's many layers to what's going on here, but I do believe we're on an off-ramp, not an on-ramp. That's my macro take, and I think it will age well, but we'll see. We're probably going to get a lot of bullshit escalation, and I'll be totally wrong, and it is what it is. But, Trump said it was going to be a 4-week rug, right? So give my take some time to breathe. Let's not, when we're carpet bombing and there's videos Monday, give it some breathing room. We still need the Venezuela template is almost impossible to apply, as Trump and the New York Times said, but not impossible. Sod this, as Ghost called out, $200 rant. Thank you very much. I know it is tough out there. It is tough for us in this media space. It is tough all around, no matter how many press conferences Trump does about how great things are. It's tough, and we know that it's not easy to part with voluntary donations to podcasters you like, but we appreciate that when you do. $200. Thank you both for your consistently excellent content and service. I appreciate your thoughtful analysis very much. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate your support. And again, guys, badlands.substack.com. That stuff is all free. If you want to support us in any of these modes, you can. Thank you to our sponsors tonight. Thank you to Rumble. Thank you to Patriot Protect. Go to patriot-protect.com/narrative. Get your shit off the internet. Besides yourselves now. Get your name and all that stuff out of the Iranians' hands. Or the Israelis, right? Whoever's out there mucking about. Otherwise, thank you guys for the chat. Thanks to Rumble for featuring us. We got 13,000 live right now at the late night ramblings of a mad Irishman. Otherwise, we'll be back next Sunday night with Jonathan Drake on the narrative. Tuesday night, Chris Paul and I will be doing Badlands Story Hour. Good movie for this week, I think. Got delayed from last week because of Snowmageddon, but we're going to do it this Tuesday. It is A Few Good Men, 1992, speaking of Tom Cruise. And that's I think that's timely. That'll be good in terms of sort of morality and absolutism and jingoism and a lot of this kind of stuff. So watch the movie, do your homework Monday night, and join us Tuesday for Story Hour. And as I always say, the war is a story, the story is a war. Act accordingly. See you next week.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Malone?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women,
to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail.
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
so do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You forbear me. John, I do not know what strengthens my heart. I swear. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.